much of debate content is entertainment content. It's not sort of generated with an authenticity towards truth or a directive towards truth at all. The goal is gotchas. It's see if we can sort of corner someone, build a straw man, make him look pathetic, try to use strong arm tactics, all sorts of different fallacious rhetoric. Instead, ends up being more about watching a boxing match. You're looking for dominance, which adheres to more of our brain complex, the reptilian complex in the brain.
Now, we have some clips that come from this debate. We have talked about the debate. We're going to play some clips from the debate. These debate clips come from Valuetainment because somehow Patrick Bet-David figured out how to get a whole bunch of ads for his shoes in front of millions of views. I'd call that savvy marketing. I'm just not a fan of it, and I'm not going to buy the shoes no matter how many times you show me the ad. Now, all that being said, we're going to play each of these clips individually, and we have special secret guest here tonight, Tony Myers. He's going to help us. He's a logic professor. He has a logic course. We'll promote that at some point because learning how to think and following the three rules of logic, law of identification, law of contradiction or non-contradiction, and the law of excluded middle, meaning two things can't be the same thing in the same respect at the same time. So they're not that hard, and they're the basis of all the ones and zeros going back and forth. So you don't have to believe in logic, but you sure do use it for a living because all these digital things depend on logic and people who understood logic and in order to write the ones and zeros to make all this stuff work. So logic is important. We're not taught about it in school. Why do you think that is? Because they want you to know how to read, but not know how to think. They definitely don't want you to know how to turn on your camera, get in front of a microphone, and express yourself in a parrhesia way. That's a Douglas Hofstadter thing where your brain puts two words together as you're trying to get a sentence out. He has a fascinating lecture on it if you're into those sort of things. Anyway, Gödel, Escher, and Bach aside, we could talk about things in a sentence by sentence. Claims are declarative sentences. They need to be compared to reality on a sentence by sentence basis to figure out if that person is reflecting the truth in a way that you could take as knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. So I'd say it like that. Do we have Tony? Is he available? Let's see. He was on there, but now, now I see him.
I'm here.
Hey, welcome.
It's a little screwed up, but that's all right. I'll work on it later.
All right. So we're going to have an overlap for a little bit. Scott's got to tap out early. He's got some important entrepreneurial activities to maintain integrity and accountability with in the morning. And so does Tony. So Scott's going to parachute out probably after this first clip. Tony will be able to hang out, he said, till about 2 a.m. And then we'll see what happens from there because that's when the show gets interesting in the wee hours of the morning when I try to figure out how to get the show landed. But right now we're in mid-flight. We got a nice cruising altitude, and we have some non-positive evidence on the record, just things that are adjacent that make you go, those are not worthy of conclusions. So we're going to have to review more evidence, think critically about it, and be able to elucidate our thoughts in a coherent way. And that's where I thought Tony might want to come out to play. Now, have you seen this debate, Tony? Do you know what we're talking about?
I know you're talking about, but I've not seen the debate. No.
All right, good. This is awesome. Yeah, right. See, I've invested many hours in something I wish I would have probably done something else, but I'm heavily invested.
I have like 100 clips up on the debate, reactions, commentary from various different content creators. So I'm very familiar with what took place, but I don't know the details. I've not watched it in the raw, so to speak, or just clips from it even. So kind of between work and the garden and all that stuff. I just haven't, which I figured would go hand in hand tonight when you asked me to come on, because I was like, well, this would be a good example for me to just see it tonight.
This is where you can get fact up, bro.
Yeah.
Because,
well, it's more,
it's good that you have better things to do.
I'm biased, but without having time to reflect on the ideas that have been presented in the debate. So it'll be a bit more authentic in that regard. So.
All right, cool. So here's what we're going to do, gentlemen. We're going to watch this first clip. It's Candace Owens and Andrew Wilson. And these clips are in no particular order, though from memory, how I remember the debate happening, I tried to put the clips in an order that they actually happened. I thought that would be more useful. And as we listen to it, let's just take notes. And it's not about the messengers. These are just human beings, and human beings don't have like perfect anything. So let's just compare the statements being made and say that makes sense. It matches up to reality, or that's a claim that needs to be substantiated, lacks evidence, and people are assuming right here where they could be learning. because I think that's where we can offer value to the audience in this structure and not be like most other people with their reactions and the takes. You know what I'm saying? I think the extra value for this audience is worth it, and they deserve it, and they step up for themselves and do long form content like this. So this is one of the rewards for paying attention to longer term things is you get a better, fuller, more detailed, more nuanced understanding that's easier to defend in day-to-day conversations, let alone making decisions and taking actions for which you have consequences. And things cost time and money. So saving our time and money is a respectful thing, and that's why we educate ourselves and do the thinking. Now, this first clip is called "There Is No Evidence." That is the claim. It is from Valuetainment with Candace Owens and Andrew Wilson. So let's see where they've started out in the claim. I don't know who named the clip. I'm assuming it's someone who works for PBD. So it is not the claim of either side, or maybe, as we'll hear in the first few seconds, one side claims there's no evidence. Let's see.
Andrew, your claim is overwhelming evidence that Tyler Robinson killed Charlie Kirk. Opening statements, opening comments.
Sure. And what I mean by overwhelming is I just find it very convincing. That's I think that's what most people mean when they say overwhelming evidence. So I have a brief opening statement. On September 10th, 2025, Charlie Kirk was murdered. Many of you already know a lot about the events which occurred after Kirk's death. You remember the ghoulish laughter, celebrations, and madness we saw from leftists all over, from TikTok invasions, debates, posts on social media, destruction of memorials, and things like this. Within weeks of Kirk's death, a cottage industry began to form, peddling various alternative theories on how he died. What special interest may have killed him, what nations were involved, and was our own government one of them? Because this was the first nationwide traumatic event in Gen Z's lifetime, the demand for answers was severe and palpable. The leading theory from the conspiracy verse is that Israel worked with the United States government to murder Charlie Kirk. Within a day or two of Kirk's death, Ian Carroll claimed that Israel killed Charlie Kirk, and the conspiracy caught on like wildfire. This theory was built on one misleading piece of evidence, that in his final days, on or around September 8th, Charlie sent a text message reading, "Jewish donors play into all the stereotypes. I cannot and will not be bullied like this, leaving me no choice but to leave the pro-Israel cause." This was sent in the context of a platforming dispute regarding Tucker Carlson. From this scintilla of misleading information, it was speculated that Israel killed Charlie Kirk because he would have successfully opposed the Iranian war. Now, that's a fun theory, and who doesn't like a good, fun conspiracy theory? I like them. But there is no evidence that Israel actually killed Charlie Kirk. And if Candace has some, I'd like her to actually show it to me. I'm open to suggestions, but to date, there hasn't been any. There is, however, tons of evidence that a leftist killed Charlie Kirk, just as Charlie feared they would. I believe Charlie Kirk, and I have the receipts. No, I didn't have a dream where he came to me and told me that the left killed him. No, he didn't come to me a dream and say, Candace Owens betrayed him. That never happened. In fact, I don't need dreams of any kind because I hold in my possession never before seen messages from Charlie Kirk to his security team on September 9th, 2025. I'm going to share the message with you today, which is the first time this information's ever been publicly revealed. On September 9th, Charlie's security team wrote to him, yes, law enforcement has been fully supportive and agreed to a security plan and posture. Tomorrow's event will be covered by both my team and the campus PD. If additional support is required, patrol units will be available. I have 11 on site. Charlie responded with this, okay, great. Remind them that they are there for one person's security only, because I'm somewhat worried the left is trying to kill me. That was a message sent September 9th. Whatever could he have meant by that? Well, I think he meant exactly what he said, that he was worried the left was going to try to kill him. Now, we'll discuss this more later on in the debate, and maybe I have more never-before-seen evidence that exposes just how wrong and, in my opinion, idiotic many of these conspiracy theories have been. But that's what happens when you rely on what's called the evidence of the gaps. In other words, they don't have evidence, they seem to just make up evidence. And what did they make up? Well, in my opinion, kind of whatever lined the pockets. And I think it's ghoulish to profit off of the death of a good man. But we came here today to debate, And so let's get to it. The debate topic today is 1, my belief that there's overwhelming evidence that Tyler Robinson killed Charlie Kirk, and 2, Candace's belief that there's overwhelming evidence that Tyler Robinson was a patsy and didn't kill Charlie Kirk. In sum, the audience is going to decide who has more evidence supporting their theory. My theory is that the state is correct that Tyler Robinson is the killer, at least based on evidence so far, and Candace's theory that Tyler Robinson is not the killer and he's a patsy set up by the feds. To be clear, this is not a question of reasonable doubt. If it was reasonable doubt, and that's all it was, and that's all Candace was proffering, I wouldn't even be here having the debate with her. It's fair to have doubts, as the trial has yet to occur, and the state hasn't even begun to try to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. But Candace makes a more forceful claim. She claims that there's more evidence that Tyler is not guilty of murder and was set up as a patsy than there is for the state's case. And I just think that that's absurd. And she will not be able to demonstrate that in any way. In fact, she has almost no real evidence at all of her theory, whereas my theory is supported by compelling witness testimony, physical evidence, multiple confessions, all of which are independently compelling, but which are even more convincing as each piece of evidence corroborates the others. You'll notice the term overwhelming was included in both theories. This is because Candace demanded I defend my use of that term, which I think is fair, in describing the evidence against Tyler Robinson. She, on the other hand, only wanted to defend her theory as merely viable. That is, until I showed her clips in which she said she believed the evidence of her theory, that Tyler Robinson's a patsy, was supported by overwhelming evidence. Only then did she agree to defend that position. Regardless, we're both defending the claim that there's overwhelming evidence on our side, so it's worth defining that term. When I say the evidence against Robinson's overwhelming, all I'm saying is that I mean that as of right now, I find it very convincing. I see almost no evidence at all, only speculation on verified claims and suggestions of things that could merely be hypothetically possible. Dreams, vibes, feelings, things like this. Almost done, by the way. I have no problem defending the state's case and welcome Candace bringing up any challenges she would like. But if I'm honest, the reason I was willing to pay the $300,000 for this debate was to finally have a chance for someone to demand Candace be held accountable for the unbelievable theories and claims she's been making. Candace's investigation is indistinguishable from a leftist operation. She couldn't be doing more damage to the right if she were trying. She uses her considerable platform to relentlessly attack one of the most influential conservative outreach organizations for young people, and she's making a mockery of the online right-wing commentary class. She's harming Republicans in an election year by dividing them. She's attacking the very organization Charlie spent his life building, and she's attacking the people he loved, including his wife. And it cost me $300,000, but today I hope that she finally answers for some of that.
Thank you, Andrew. Candace?
Did you get it out of your system?
I did.
Okay, great. Well, I'm not going to waste time with the preamble because I think I just want to get to the substance of the debate, and we'll just speak to the audience. I have obviously had an audience since we've been covering this case. People know that there was a personal friendship between me and Charlie, and diminishing the pursuit of something that makes sense regarding what happened on September 10th. By throwing it to, this is just people who are conspiracy theorists. These are people who are just trying to generate clicks. I don't think that people should be satisfied by that. I want people to remember that it's important to think. We've been lied to by the government a great many times over, just the last couple of years, if you just think of the things that we've learned about our government. And I do want to say this. What's been the most disturbing element, I think, for everyone is that not only does the narrative not make any sense, which I'm going to demonstrate, I don't need to waste time with the preamble going through the points or trying to insult you or pretending that I've been running a podcast saying it's just dreams and vibes like I'm Miss Cleo. And that's the reason why it's taking so many influencers. It looks like $1 billion industry of influencers to dispute everything Candace says. It's not because I'm on my platform saying I had a dream last night. I don't think I think that diminishes you as an argument. Obviously, we have presented a lot of evidence. You just presented a text message and said, this is evidence. Well, that's how this entire thing began. You're talking about how Israel got into the conversation. It was because immediately after Charlie died, one of the first things we saw was this push to make us all think and remember how much he loved Israel. It's because the prime minister of Israel, who's fighting like a 27-front war, felt that he needed to come do a little mini tour and to be, strangely, to state that I did not kill Charlie Kirk when nobody was having that thought that I can remember. Nobody was going, I wonder if Bibi Netanyahu killed Charlie Kirk. And then we had a round of influencers who lied and said Charlie was not changing on Israel, that he wasn't having any disagreements regarding that topic, that the day he died, he just loved Israel so much. And I demonstrated via a text message, which you just mentioned, and you're now contextualizing and pretending it was just about Tucker Carlson, which is not true. It was a part of a broader shift that Charlie was having over the last, I would say, actually on your show, it began since October 7th, which is when I began asking myself more questions about Israel as well. And so, yeah, when all of these things happen in the immediate aftermath, and then I drop a text message after everyone is denying that, Tucker Carlson then comes out and confirms the conversations that he had with Charlie. Megyn Kelly then comes out and confirms the private conversations that she had with Charlie. People then begin to ask a reasonable question, which is, why are we lying about this? If they were forthcoming with that and they had said, hey, yeah, Charlie was starting to ask questions. I think after October 7th, it's reasonable that people are starting to re-examine our relationship with Israel. We wouldn't be here today. But it has been lie after lie after lie, debunk after debunk after debunk. Yes, I did share that I had a dream that Charlie was betrayed. It's not a dream anymore. It's a reality. I look at what the organization has become, the people that they are partnering with, the lies that they are telling, the extraordinary people that they're sending out to say that I hadn't speak to Charlie since 2018, and it begins to look like a conspiracy. And just as a historical fact, that entire term was created by the CIA to gaslight people after the assassination of JFK. So it's not exactly one that makes me nervous. Like, calling somebody a conspiracy theorist is essentially saying that they demand further answers and they're not accepting the Fed slop. So I'm grateful that you came today. I don't need to, like I said, take cheap shots and discuss your manner of debate or your strategy. And I'm also grateful that you shared that you had that text message today, because everybody watching knows that I have been demanding not a debate, just an open conversation with Turning Point USA. They should be here. It shouldn't be you in that chair. It should be the person that took Charlie's place, maybe Erica Kirk, maybe Andrew Colbert. He's a spokesperson. And rather than doing that, they send us another influencer. So let's see how it goes.
When we set out to create a shoe that blends comfort, function, and luxury,
All right, pull it.
we had the choice to make it.
At least it's not a Converse All-Star. It's not a Chuck Taylor. All right, now I've got a series of thoughts that I'll unfold from what I noticed from both sides. I'm particularly looking to be convinced by Andrew Wilson's belief in the evidence and looking to find what he understands and knows that I don't know already, so I can add it to my understanding. Maybe I shift my decision-making power. I'm not at a point where I would call a conclusion or put the conclusion, like, here's an example. 9/11 was an inside job, was a popular phrase 20 years ago. I never agreed with that phrase because it leads with the conclusion before you explain the individual parts, how they fit together, and how you would reach that conclusion, making it a null set. It can't be passed on as knowledge. Same thing. If you come to a conclusion and say, this guy's a patsy and the feds set him up, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, like, there's a bunch of things that have yet to be proven yet. And I wouldn't take that on as a debating point, but I would start this conversation and get Tony and Scott's perspective by elucidating a definition. This is a good place to start. A patsy was not easy to find because they wants to show me Patsy Cline. But if we look at the etymology and the fall guy aspect, patsy and fall guy are interchangeable slang terms for a person who is easily deceived or wrongly blamed for a crime or mistake to protect others. The others are the people who actually do the crime. Origin and etymology. Patsy, the term emerged in 1902 as a shortening of Patsy Bolivar, a character from 19th century U.S. humor sketches who was a meek, slow-witted boy, frequently blamed for pranks and punished by teachers. Fall guy. This phrase appeared not in the 1980s as a TV show, but this phrase appeared in the U.S. mass culture by the 1920s, notably as the title of a 1925 Broadway play and a 1930 crime film. While popularity, but incorrectly attributed to the Secretary of Interior Albert B. Hall of the Teapot Dome scandal, its actual origin is disputed, likely deriving from criminal slang for arrest or prison term. You have some distinctions and some usage, and you can get all learnified on that, but I really think that we could just use fall guy as an etymological synonym. We mean the same thing when we're talking about fall guy. Now, under that, guys, now we understand what Candace's claim is. Patsy, somebody who's maybe put at the scene and tied to the crime, but maybe didn't pull the trigger and fire the bullet that killed Charlie Kirk, a bullet which is still disputed in caliber. especially according to gun owners who know the difference between such boom boom type sticks that are out there. So, gentlemen, let's enter into it. And Scott, before you go, let's drop your thoughts, and then also tell people where they could find you during the week, because it's 1 a.m. when you need to tap out, probably. Are you muted? You
Dang
there?
it, I'm muted. Okay, gosh. Okay,
All right,
here we
all
go.
right. Mulligan,
go.
Jerry
So,
Mulligan, saxophonist.
Yeah, I mean, it's just it's just kind of like I don't know. I'm curious what your guys' thoughts are on this. Just disingenuous, just to come out the gate and just start reading your opening statements off a thing. It's like he obviously, like, I don't know why they even sent him in there, because he didn't know much about the case really. Like, he was just kind of just, it almost like he's just like the sacrificial lamb, maybe, in a lot of ways. Like, it didn't seem like it was he was very prepared, and his opening statements didn't really hit very well. And I'll just say this too, like, the thing that just kept sticking out to me in his approach and just his tactics in general, man, like, I find a lot of this newly emerging, like, debate, like, okay, so a lot of the debate stuff happening right now, it's like they're basically creating like a new UFC sport for debate. Have you seen all
Yeah,
this?
it's
Where
World War
like
Debate. Sam
the World
Tripoli's
War debate. Now,
project,
much love to
Nashville.
Sam
You
Tripoli
got to
and
see Jay
all the
Dyer versus Stefan Molyneux coming up.
I know. But like the you know what I mean? It's like, okay, so I learned from you guys, I think, like the whole idea that debate originally was all about, let's find the truth, guys. Let's have a discussion, and let's use each of our positions to help us all arrive at the truth, and everybody wins. Whereas now that's not at all the case whatsoever. It's all about dunking on somebody. It's all about embarrassing somebody, doing aha moments, gotcha moments, and of course viral sound bites. That's what it's all about, and it has nothing to do with winning or the truth, no, it has everything to do with winning. It has nothing to do with the truth or objectivity or anything like that. It's about who can score who on what, and it's kind of, and so therefore, since the goal is not to arrive at the truth, it seems to me like it's less about, so it's more about technicalities and stuff like that. It's like, oh, I got you on this technicality, and what it reminds me of every time, especially when I hear like one of these Andrew Wilson type characters. It kind of it reminds me of like having a discussion or a debate with these like pro-vaccine people, these like super zealous pro-vaccine people, where it's like when I point out certain things about their paradigm, where it's like, to me it's pseudoscience. Like, you do random control studies with MMR vaccines, and your placebo is just another MMR vaccine. Like, that just doesn't make any freaking sense, dude. And so it's like, but in their world,
Call
it's
it
like,
corrupted science, because that's not how science is supposed to work. They corrupt
exactly.
it.
But then if you have somebody on our side who's like a Brian Hooker or a someone of that nature who does, or a Paul Thomas or anybody like that presents a study that's maybe not the most robust study in the world, but hey, at least it's a signal that maybe we should look into this a little bit further. Okay, that study doesn't get an attack on the merits. They get their medical license taken away, and then they get the study retracted and saying, "Oh, he got his medical license taken away, so that study is invalid." So it's like, so it's kind of the same thing where it's like this the arguments or the debates. It's just so far away from anything that I would I don't know. So it just reminds me of like, yeah, when I'm debating with a super zealous pro-vaccine person, it's like you almost can't even get in the same room with them. You can't even get on the same page or in the same ring as them, because we're operating in such different paradigms that there's no way to even interact. So I'm just curious, and so it's just, I got the sense in this case too, like there's no changing anybody's mind. Like, I bet you in the whole world, not a single person's mind was changed. Maybe some people thought they'd look into something more, but I think that you're right. Like the people who came there, the people who agree with Andrew are supporters of Andrew. The people that agree with Candace are supporters of Candace. Like, people probably don't even know who Charlie Kirk is. Half the people watching this have never even heard of Charlie Kirk. You know what I mean? It's like we've gotten so far away from that. It's just like, I don't know, man. Like, the whole world is just sick to the core. So,
well, this podcast is actually the healthy immune response of a country that wants to survive. You have to be able to get at truth. Philosophy is a tool to find truth. And so in this debate type of forum, knowing how to use philosophy and logic and these sort of things are of paramount importance, not just for your own education, but for the edification of the audience.
Yep.
It's for their
Absolutely.
pleasure. It's for their, you elucidate things, you describe things to the audience for their edification, for their pleasure. And they're like, oh, I'm glad I showed up because I learned some things that I didn't know beforehand. And I actually looked at both sides. That's worthwhile. That happened for me in the Julian Dory debate. It didn't happen so much for the PBD debate.
Yeah.
But
Exactly. And it
I
can
know
be
you have
done
to
well.
tap
It
out
can be done well.
for, you got a construction project. You're helping
Yep.
construction
So-
company with the marketing and launch and
Yep.
stuff like that.
Yep, as this is my whale clients. These are my big clients. I'm meeting with the owners tomorrow in the morning. We're going over some business, like marketing strategy stuff, and then we're going off to a couple of their job sites to do some filming. So it's about an hour and a half away. So yeah, but anyway, I appreciate it. Tony, man, thank you so much, dude. I came onto this show right after you, and of course, like big shoes to fill, and then it's been a heck of a ride ever since. But you know, you're the GOAT, man. You're the best in the business, and everyone's always like, man, I wish Tony was here. I'm like, yeah, I know what you mean. You know what I mean? The show's taking on a different flavor with me here. I'm mostly just joking. I'm just kind of like the everyday guy. But I bow to you.
Yeah,
And I
you're
let
being
you
too
too.
humble. You're being much too humble. So I've heard great things, and you've filled those shoes phenomenally well and much better. It's just a different style, but it's not a better or worse. So I really appreciate you taking on that mantle and riding shotgun with Rich and continuing the legacy that, he and I built, or really Rich built. I just helped participate at various times throughout my life, and his success, his wife's success, his family's success. So because I believe in his message, and I believe in what he's been able to uncover in his life experiences. So I appreciate you, is all I'm trying to say, for helping facilitate what we started doing many, 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 many years ago. So thank you, Scott. And thank
Yeah,
you
man,
for those
thank
kind
you.
words.
Well, I'm gonna let you guys just do it old school style. So I'm gonna go to
Tony's
bed, but I'm gonna catch the
Tony's
rest of it.
ridden shotgun on and off since like 2010 in various elements and projects. And when I started this show in 2020, it was me and Tyler Bloyer. So shout out to Tyler. And then it was me solo, and then it was like me and LD, and then it was me solo, and then it was me and Tony, and me and Paul, and me and Scott. And each co-host brings their specific flavor and their favorite, sidearm and shotgun to keep the wagon train here safe. And we're pioneering every week. We don't know what's going to happen. You saw the first hour of the show. We're like, we couldn't get the tech to work after 300 episodes, and we do it all the time. Tech gremlins get in there and they do things and updates, and we just have to adapt, evolve, and overcome. And
Speaking of tech, is my lower third backwards?
No, you're good.
No,
No,
it's
it's
good.
not.
Perfect.
It's looking backwards on that's fine. I got a new monitor, I got a new setup. So
Oh yeah,
I'm
yeah, yeah.
sitting here playing
There's a
around.
mirroring option right
The
there.
mirroring
I
option,
understand.
yeah.
There's times when I log in to go in an interview with StreamYard and it shows everything backwards, and then or Google or whatever other platform, And
Sometimes it does, and sometimes it doesn't. So I was wondering.
that's a legit question to ask because you don't want to assume. See, that's a sign of intelligence. By the way, there's a bell curve of intelligence. There's always going to be this half of the bell curve over here that doesn't want to think. They'd rather assume. That's cool. That's fine until it threatens freedom of other people on the other side. Now, here's the other thing that comes on with that bell curve. Bell curve, big curve, right? You're someplace in there. Bell curve doesn't change. You have to. Okay. And the less intelligent you are, the more certainty you have because you have a smaller data set. And the more intelligent you are, the more uncertainty you have because you have a larger data set. So there's also these dynamics that just exist. And we're all part of a population. So we find ourselves in that bell curve at various points in life. It might be important to figure out where you're at. And if you are on the end of the patsy, if you're the fall guy, if they are giving you propaganda and lying to you and occluding evidence that you're like, oh, I trusted they did gunshot residue tests to tie him to firing a gun that day. Now, true, 2 to 10 million Americans would easily test positive for a GSR test, and it doesn't tie you to the weapon. It just means you might have fired a weapon in the past 24, 48, 72 hours. So there's a series of these things. Like if they find out Tyler had GSR all over him and he doesn't have an excuse, and then they find out his rifle was also shot recently, which could be the reason for the GSR, and he and the rifle were both at the scene, and there's a projectile from the rifle with a spent casing that match up in some way, shape, or form forensically, these would be like, oh, that person did the thing beyond reasonable doubt.
Yeah, reasonable doubt. That's a criteria of evidence in the court system. That's correct.
And that's how jurisprudence is conducted in America, as far as I know. And I'm not a lawyer. Like I said, I watch, Matlock and Columbo and, Quincy. That's a good
All the
one.
stuff my parents used to
Forensic pathology. That's in the Julian Dory clip coming up later. But yeah, so let's go through your analysis, Tony. What did you see? during the opening salvo statements. Personally, I have no problem with Andrew reading a statement. And I think anyone who puts $300,000 of, he said, his own money into doing the thing because he cared so much about the case, like, let him read a
Are we
statement.
sure
I
it's
don't see
not
the problem with that.
TPUSA's money?
Well, he
I'm just
said it
scared.
was his money.
Okay.
He said in that opening salvo, it was his money. So I
Okay.
would think someone who puts in $300,000, I don't know what kind of wealth the gentleman has. Obviously, he's pretty wealthy to have $300,000 to throw on a case that he didn't even read the charges. So more respect to his side right there. Like, he got it done. Like, he got platformed. He got hours with Candace. He got tens of millions of people watching and talking about him. Good.
They made
Good
up for
PR, Andrew. Well played.
it. Yeah. They made up for it. I think that $300,000.
Oh, Scott, that's right.
was-
Did we give your links before you signed off?
I could
I
just
saw
send
him in
it
the chat here. I just want to make sure he was good and he wasn't waiting for me to take a breath. Oh, he's good. I think he's off. All right. So please continue.
Firstly, I actually wanted to say this while Scott was still on, but he's not, so you can listen to it back if he does so.
He's
But
got Clip Genie. He's the inventor of Clip Genie with Dean. So he'll
Oh,
be able to
perfect.
just search his name, Scott Armstrong, calling Scott Armstrong. He could use as a search.
yeah,
And then
much.
hear this message.
Yeah, I wanted to comment just on something that Scott said that is true. It's something we're seeing in the YouTube space and online media in general in regards to the fact that much of debate content is entertainment content. You know, it's not sort of generated with an authenticity towards truth or directive towards truth at all. It's direct. You got to think of the incentive package here is to entertain, is to get likes, hit that like, subscribe button, hit the bell icon, all the nonsense you hear from every content creator, whether they're good or not. That's just the game that has to be played on YouTube. But much of the intellectual content I see from all the spheres of intellectual content that I consume on a daily and weekly and monthly basis and so forth is geared toward more and more faux debates, is what we'll call them, which is really entertainment style debates where the goal is gotchas. It's see if we can sort of corner someone, build a straw man, make him look pathetic, try to use strong arm tactics, all sorts of different fallacious rhetoric, all sorts of things in order to create conditions that oftentimes have nothing to do with the theme or content of the debate itself, or at least the reason why that debate is being had, usually around an intellectual premise of some type, an idea, a conceptual, a theory, whatever, a concept, whatever it might be. Instead, ends up being more about the what am I trying to say here? But I would say the caricature, the way you can position the other individual, it becomes something more like watching a boxing match. You're looking for dominance, which adheres to more of our brain complex, the reptilian complex in the brain, that very tribal, instinctual sort of survival, fight or flight. The same mentality that gets us to love and sort of honor sports, which I'm the biggest sports fan. But oftentimes, like when we look at sort of the rabid fan base of sports around the world, a lot of times it's also relegating people to that very limited portion of their brain that's more just relegated for survival. And I think that's what the debates have sort of emerged into on the online space. So you don't see, and there hasn't been much history in most debating, most critiques, most arguments going back and forth. It's funny, I was listening to Will Durant talk about this in regards to Caesar and Rome going over the Roman Empire, just the sheer amount of absurdity when it came to debating ideas. I mean, it was absurd.
So you're talking
back
about The
then.
History of Civilization by Will Durant, that
Yeah.
whole audio and book set? Yeah.
That's correct. And that was his third volume, Caesar and Christ. So when I was going through that one, I remember him speaking to the fact that like this is nothing new in history when it comes to the absurd, sort of fallacious rhetoric, the ad hominems, the character assassination attempts that have been done. It's just that for a small pocket, we could call it a window during the Scholastic era, we'll say from about 1000 AD to about the 14th century, the 1300s, the beginning of the Italian Renaissance, you had the emergence in the medieval university system of classical debate, which was the attempt, especially under Albertus Magnus, Albert the Great, who taught then St. Thomas Aquinas, much with at the same time the information coming in, preserved much in Arab communities of Aristotle and the Aristotelian and Greek traditions of logic, that they wanted to codify it in a structure, in a format that we sort of call classical debate. And in classical debate, it really was more or less about finding the truth than it was about winning. And that they structured the debate in such a way to try to facilitate that. It was highly structured. It was they even were so absurd as to name logical deductions. They had like special code names for them, and they would call them out. This is not a joke. Like Barbara means triple A, which means all affirmative propositions. So it's stuff like that that they were very, very pedantic on. We'll just leave it at that. But nonetheless, it did exist. And even then, I'm sure it was very much imperfect because human beings are far from perfect. That's for the transcendent if one believes in such things. But regardless of that, they at least attempted to do so. And the goal was really for the audience to move towards truth rather than one side or the other to look better. Or it wasn't just about an egoic sort of positioning or posturing, if you will, was what we see in modern debates. So that being said, wanted to give a shout out to Scott's very observant sort of realization with that, is that's very much a continual phenomenon. It's been going on throughout human history. It's just until we institutionalize debate to try to ascertain or adhere to the truth with moderators, with, you know, with the whole sort of with greater structure around the laws of logic, that largely now this pertains to entertainment and pertains to how much like was it popularity factors, you know, something more akin to a high school cafeteria than something that you think adults are trying to pursue truth on. We see this in the sciences all the time. The vitriol in the sciences are absurd and go back hundreds and hundreds of years. We see this in I honestly see more honest and open debate around sports topics than I do around meaningful topics, which says a lot about the current state of our culture. That being said, for Andrew to read a opening statement like that is actually very smart for people who are ignorant. Let me phrase, and I could get into other examples of this. I've seen this done so many times where they inherently set the parameters of the debate with an opening statement, creating a number of situations, false dichotomies. They create straw manning. They set the conditions for false. Let me restate myself. They set the conditions for false dichotomies, either or fallacies, is the second condition for straw manning. And they do so by stating that their opponent said X, I am going to say Y, almost saying that we're not going to talk about or let the conversation go with the general theme of the topic. We're going to start with saying that Candace says X, I say Y. Are we going to get into, did Candace really say X? Did I really say Y? Has it really been presented in the proper context, quoting out of context? Another fallacy? Who knows? But this is great. By setting these parameters for an ignorant audience, it makes it seem like we're operating within this space now, a space that he's defining. And it's so, so important because if you can set the conditions in an opening salvo, so to speak, like that, because our shots are being fired, you can then really, in the mind of the listener, set the conditions for the way the rest of the debate will go, and also use it as a way to corner your opponent into feeling as though they have to defend themselves over something they may or may not have said, or over context that you're saying they've said that they have not been able to elucidate properly, meaning provide greater context as to why something was said maybe out of context. So I think that was very smart of him. And my initial thought is like there's a bunch of conditions being set here for the emergence of a number of ways to try to entrap. That's the word I'm looking for, entrap Candace Owens. Now, Candace is brilliant. She's so smart and she's so prepared for this because she's been obsessing, rightfully so, it's one of her closest friends, over this issue since it occurred back on September 10th, 2025. The majority of her shows since then, minus a little foray into the Macron, situation, we'll just leave it at that, are mainly this, and it still mainly consists of this and some pop culture critiques and other things, but it's around this issue, particularly because this issue, if any of we'll use the term circumstantial evidence is correct, leads towards major world events that are currently happening, like a war in the Middle East and a war in and Eastern Europe that have interesting connections as well to a country located in the Middle East. So along the Mediterranean there. So I'm just saying, maybe she's right, maybe she's wrong, who knows? I'm just saying that it connects to major world events that are happening right now. Hence why it seems to be an ever-present, evergreen topic that doesn't go away. just like Epstein, as much as the political class would love for that topic to go away.
Well, that's funny because I got Epstein in my notes here too. All right, so yeah, I think it's all right for someone to read an opening statement, especially when you got 300 grand. I would have like
Oh yeah.
the pay to have the debate thing. I guess is just like that's what you have to do to get that forum. But I thought originally it was like a bet and that there was going to be like somebody wins and they donate it to charity or something like that. But that's not what
Yeah.
happened. So
That's what I thought too.
regarding what you had to say about Scott, my pithy distillation was the message is driven by the medium. Right? Social media is making people do like soundbite gotcha type things because they got to get clicks and views. That's not that's away from truth. You got to figure out. And if you have an audience that can't discern truth, like why you like that's a thing right there. Back in the day when Tony was talking about like in the Renaissance era, let's say, you had an audience of astute observers of reality knowing how to use their five senses and adjudicate inductive and deductive reasoning, and they could tell if somebody's bullshitting from the podium. They could call it out. Audience no more. They think the people at the podium are the authority, and they forget that they are the judges who are supposed to be smarter than usually the people at the podium. So you can help, get the education going. They're going to bring some things, but you're going to know some things. You have to have that conversation in order to grow. When it's just like bouncing off everybody, that's not growth. That's just conflict. That's just conflict. And conflict for what? So the murderers can get away? Because if Tyler's not the murderer, the real murderer has had a year to go get away and wipe the tracks and forensic cleanup and all the other stuff that goes on when they have a patsy and they do a covert op hit. Do our governments do? Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I think you're already heading there. Is there Rich, let me ask this question to you. Has a precedent ever been set by either our government or other governments around the world for doing such activity?
You mean like the art of assassination? Is there a history of political assassinations that go on throughout history? And you could read Machiavelli, discourses or discourses on Livy. Chapter 6 is his conspiracy chapter. You can read The Art of War by Machiavelli. There's like political activity is traditionally driven by things that people aren't told about. That's part of history. It goes on. The Epstein remark comes from Candace bringing up the CIA document 1035-960 concerning criticism of the Warren Commission report, which is about Edward J. Epstein's book Inquest that questioned the JFK assassination. But the Epstein files connection is, if you search the Epstein files, you can find many invitations between Jeffrey Epstein inviting Edward J. Epstein over to his place for dinner. Like the title's subject line is like Jeffrey Epstein again, ? Like inviting him back over. And they do share a same last name. And Edward J. Epstein, called for the 9/11 Shadow Commission in the email to Ghislaine Maxwell during a time in the Epstein emails that are all blacked out, as if Israel might have had something to do with their agent and his correspondence during that time period. Millions of emails still redacted to this day, because I could only assume the people behind the redactions are still holding power over our current politicians. So these are just a couple of things that came up, but let me go through the things here. Andrew. Okay, so dreams. So if I were Andrew, I would have selected her strongest evidence, not the straw man of her dreams,
Correct.
intuitions, emotions,
Correct.
women stuff. I would have gone after, like, you said this in these texts, and here's why it's not right, or whatever. But those straw men, I was like noticeable. I'm like, why would you start out? It's like watching a chess player, and I'm questioning his opening move. You know what I'm saying? So that was
But
what
that's a really
go
good
ahead.
point, though, because what
Thank you.
he's trying to do, sorry about my camera shifting, it's weird, is he's trying to lower the authority or the representation of authority that Candace represents in the alternative community. That's just to say that he's trying to make her seem as though first of all, he's trying to use conspiracy as though anyone who does conspiracy, it's just an entertainment thing. It's not real. Because he at one point said like, "Oh, I love a good conspiracy too, but this is just absurd and asinine and whatnot." That's done on purpose to lower the value of Candace. Now, will that work? I think that was a poor strategic. Obviously, he's not doing this alone. He has a team of, communication specialists and maybe lawyers and whatever consultants, we'll just call them, around him, schooling him on this. I'm going to assume, at least, I'm theorizing that's possible. Or hypothesizing that's a possibility, that he had training in order to do this. However, I think that was a strategic error on their part. Funny that I keep moving. primarily because Candace is one of the biggest podcasts in the space right now. I think she might even be eclipsing Joe Rogan in some instances, at least when it comes to live stream. I don't know if Joe Rogan does any live streaming. He might just pre-record, but the point is, like, she is one of the biggest in this podcasting space. She's one of the most influential people. Well, people know her. They either love her or hate her. There's people in the middle, I'm sure, but they kind of know who she is, what she isn't. And to try to lower her as though she's a crazy conspiracy theorist, I feel like is a tactic you would do if you believe that your opponent was not well known. Like, to sort of paint them as though there's someone. So like when people come in and watch
Not worth
PBD,
listening to.
exactly, which is like
That's not
people
going to
already,
convince her audience, is it?
or the people who
No.
hate her or don't like her or
Yeah.
aren't not even her audience because they know who she is. They know what she represents. Like, that's just not the best tactic, in my opinion. Didn't mean to jump, but
That's
that,
right.
I just wanted to make a
We're
point.
Monday morning quarterbacking a debate. We're debating the debate about the debate. And I think that was actually Jay Dyer's idea. So we have to give credit where credit is due. He also introduced this new text. New evidence was introduced where Charlie was concerned and the PD and security failed after he said specifically, pretty please with sugar on top, don't let these guys kill me. But it goes on anyway. So the next part is, remind me again, how do we know Tyler's a leftist? Because the theory only works if Tyler's a leftist, furry, they're gay related, whatever the thing was going on, all that stuff that involves the Discord messaging and the I love you texts and a bunch of other stuff that seems like specious evidence that really wouldn't cut the mustard to get into court for prosecution for a death sentence. I'm just confused. The evidence that Tyler is a leftist is what social media posts, what public comments, what did he
But
say to friends at school? Where's that evidence? I missed it.
Yeah, exactly. But that's the conditions they're setting up for the fallacious rhetoric later on to try to push her into a corner. Like, these are
Sure.
the foundations of building straw men, right? They're making these accusations. It's actually called question begging epithet, which is just a from a fallacy standpoint, it's petitio principii, which is begging the question. So it's going in circles. So he's begging by saying this. It's simply by saying, "Oh, Tyler Robinson was this crazed leftist." Well, how much evidence do we have that he was a crazed leftist? How much evidence is legitimate that he was a crazed leftist? So forth and so on. It's sort of the cart before the horse. It's asking, sort of assuming before you've established. Now, there is some evidence supposedly that that's the case, but nonetheless, he makes that assumption without sort of building out the case for it. But that sets the parameters. That's the key, because now in the audience's eye, in their mind's eye, so to speak, with hearing all of this, they're sort of like conditioned. This is the medium as the message. By the medium, they're being conditioned to accept a certain level of parameters that give Andrew a better opportunity to use fallacious rhetoric to make it seem as though Candace's theories are absurd.
So
And
we blame Marshall McLuhan.
no, he's a prophet, for better or for worse, about the modern digital age. He just unfortunately, he was more prophetic than not. I mean, appreciate his thoughts and ideas, a brilliant man, but at the same time, would have hoped that many of them wouldn't have come to fruition. But that's also what makes him a genius, even if it was very sordid realizations about humankind and how technology influences it.
What you're saying is game knows game,
Yeah.
even if they're on the other side of the field. We don't like them, they're the opponent, but they are really good at what they do. So you have to respect that. Otherwise, you're not going to learn how to overcome their evil and take back your freedom.
He knew what Norbert Wiener was up to. He knew what the cyberneticians
Yeah,
were
but
up
he didn't
to.
do anything to stop it. Like Bucky Fuller also was like a globalist too, but he still had some ideas you might liberate yourself with aside from his personal, like messenger and the message. Separate them. It's a lot more beneficial to everybody around. Tony, there's never before seen evidence. Has it been released to the public? Probably. Where did he get it? I'm going to guess Andrew Colvett. Why was it held a year and brought out as a gotcha in a debate when it's a murder
As an opening
investigation?
statement. As an opening
It's a
statement.
murder investigation. It's a little disingenuous. It's like you go through discovery and then you debate the evidence and then you go to trial. Well, this wasn't entered into discovery. Did you just come into possession of it, Mr. Colvett? It's interesting.
Well, this goes to the medium as a message again. It's like I see this all the time on the Amazon Shorts or TikTok or whatever, where people just spew false facts. But if you say it with authority, people take it to be true. And so this is the only thing I've heard about this debate that's been shown to be false. or at least the context in which he presented that text to be false. But we'll get to that, I'm sure.
Well, I'm going to assume he's telling the truth because it doesn't
Okay.
benefit me to call him a liar or anything like that. I'm sure they'll release it and we'll see it's an authentic text.
Oh no, it's authentic, but yeah,
So let's move to the next step. So now there's this text that says Charlie's under attack from leftists and they didn't protect him. That's provable, right? And it is ghoulish to profit. He did say that, and I do agree with that idea. I think it just applies to the people who sit at the Charlie Kirk desk every day who aren't named Erica. Erica has a right to sit at her husband's desk and do whatever she wants. The other two dudes who are the Charlie Kirk show that never changed the name of the Charlie Kirk show and bring in all that money, I think it's ghoulish because they're gaslighting and withholding evidence from the public that Candace was expected to know, but it just was showed up on Andrew's phone in the debate. So he used it like a gotcha, like you should know, but it hadn't been disclosed yet. So it's like an ex post facto thing. You got to give the fact, and then she's aware, and then you could say, "Hey, you knew that thing," but you can't bring the thing out and say you should have known this when Andrew Colvin.
Yeah, because
hit
the
it for a year."
gotcha. It's a gotcha.
Yeah,
She
right.
like
So
the whole opening statement is to
Yeah.
straw man is to set all those conditions to make her to delegitimize any authority that she brings with a sense of like conviction that the evidence that she's bringing, as circumstantial as it may be, should be considered. They're trying to lower that sense of like her worth, her value, her intelligence, and so forth by the caricature of a conspiracy theorist. Of here's this gotcha text because she has routinely for almost a year now, almost a year, yeah, talked about the text that she received. That also Tucker talks about, not the same text, but the same context around the text that she received about the disillusionment, let's say, with the Jewish billionaire class, or excuse me, Zionist billionaire class that seems to have been very upset with Charlie's takes on Iran, with Charlie's takes on the events in Gaza and Hamas and the genocide that's taken place there. And so, and the timing of when that text took place. So here they are coming out with another text, curious timing, that tries to delegitimize one of her key points, as circumstantial as it may be, of evidence to show that there may be something more to this. Just saying.
Now, to be fair and even-handed, Candace released texts a couple weeks ago that showed Charlie had these feelings a lot earlier in the timeline than most people suspected, but she also waited. And then there's the discretion of publishing your friend's text post-death in an open murder investigation to try to find out what's going on. So there's a whole lot of things. So I'm not placing blame on either side. I'm just observing. Andrew said it's fair to have doubts. I agree. And he's trying to help people avoid from jumping to conclusions and formulating conclusions without having a step-by-step chain of evidence and understanding the custody and nature of that evidence before you make a conclusion. But most people weren't taught that in school, and we're not going to penalize most people for not being taught that in school either. We're going to use it as an opportunity to say there is a higher level way of thinking and seeing clearly through these that is not nearly as caustic and like conflict ridden. Okay. And it might get you less views, but you actually get more wisdom, knowledge, and understanding about how the world works and get to make better decisions for the rest of your life. So maybe the education is more valuable than the clickbait. But let me continue here. So it's fair to have doubts. There's two theories in play. There's the theory being attributed to Andrew Wilson. There's a theory being attributed to Candace. No one ever showed that either of those theories was anything that they said, but they both owned up to it and fought from that position. So that's going on. So it's a dual prompt debate instead of a single prompt debate where someone claims a positive and somebody has to, prove that's not true or whatever you want to have a debate. It's one thing being claimed, and then if reasonable doubt comes in, that thing is no longer the thing that's on the floor that wins. But when you have two and both people have a timeline and they're trying to put their evidence in amidst the conversation, they're trying to stack evidence to prove their claims, to convince the other side of the audience that come over here, hey, we have a better way of thinking, we have better evidence, etc. I did not see that play out really for either side. I know of pieces of evidence that could have been marshaled on both sides that were not marshaled. Now, I know they both brought a lot of clips, and maybe they didn't play as many clips as but still, you would play like, here's my best one. If I'm only playing one, boom, here you go. This means that can't be true. Have a nice day. Thank you. And move on. But none of that got done, which makes me think maybe the whole point of this debate was the next debate. I'm just going to lay that out there. Just like maybe COVID was the thing that makes you get a jab because you fear the thing, so you get the thing, right?
So we back to my idea of the valuetainment then? that it's all just
I
entertainment? Because
I don't
people
know.
have critiqued Candace
I
rightfully
do
so.
know how Valuetainment and Patrick McDavid, Vinny and his crew used their Minect, and I got charged $100 when we were trying to liberate Mohammed Ibrahim, a teenager from Florida who was held in an Israeli adult prison after his cousin, also an Palestinian American, was held in Israeli. No, he got stoned to death when he was in the West Bank. But two cousins from Florida, American citizens, were being killed over there. And I thought since PBD was out of Florida, like if we just put the story in front of them, they would at least give it coverage. But $100 in Vinny Minect back and forth doesn't get even that. So hats off to the Young Turks, or at least, it's the hat tip to the Young Turks for at least covering Mohammed Ibrahim's story and having Zayed Kadir on there, as we also had Zayed here on Grand Theft World. And I recommended Zayed last week when I was on Danny Jones' Patreon, because I think that type of interview is worth doing. So learning about these various elements of history, two theories in combat, none of which neither side had time to really flesh out those theories with evidence that was shared with the audience. So that educational opportunity is missed. We already covered the history of the Patsy. We covered the Epstein conspiracy theory 1035-960 document. But I made some notes. The $300,000, that tells me you're really invested and you're interested and you're very certain. And you didn't know the charges. There's 7.
This makes me question how the origin of the 300,000. That's all. I'm just saying. I mean,
Personal
maybe
money.
his own, but
He said cost me 300,000. So did he get a donation from TPUSA and then he had to take that
yeah, there's a lot of
$300,000
ways
and
to
pay?
say
I don't know, and I'm
paid
not making claims.
300,000. Yeah.
I'm just saying it's a lot of money, bro, to bet, unless you're just a gambler. Like if you're like the Dan Bilzerian, you gamble $20 million a day or whatever, and it's not a big deal. God bless you, bro.
There are
Hope
actual
you're-
professional gamblers that
Yeah.
do play odds and make a living off that. As absurd as that sounds, and you can find them
Yeah,
on
but-
YouTube, and they'll tell you their methodologies, and it's interesting to watch. But yeah, I wouldn't
If
say
you're going to
this. I wouldn't
defend a
say
position,
Andrew-
wouldn't you want to know what the position is that you're defending? The 7 counts are what you're defending in the debate. So I didn't understand that. I was confused by that debate tactic, you might say.
I would agree. And it's interesting to note as well that even in high school debate, which I don't even know if high school debate clubs still exist because it's probably considered racist these days with the modern woke culture and postmodern culture we live in. But if any of it still does exist, like typically I just laugh because that structure is not utilized in these online debates. In regards to usually just taking a premise and having to argue for and against it positively or negatively. Even if it's against something you don't believe in, to try to test your ability to understand the other side to the point
Or even
with
mock
what you're saying about
trials, another
Andrew.
exercise.
Mock trials. Yeah, of
Yeah.
course. Yeah, it's a great. I
Yeah.
forgot about, we used to do that in high school. I remember that. I had buddies do mock trial, debate club, all that stuff. I mean, it's just like that. It was a totally different structure to force you into being uncomfortable and having to argue for a position you may not even agree with. So you understand it inside and out. And here, this dude doesn't even understand it. Andrew Colvett, what you just said. I'm just saying $300,000 of your quote unquote own money, which, hey, without any evidence to the contrary, I have to go with the claim being made. And he doesn't even understand the charges. So
That's bold. That's courageous. There's a lot of ways to look at that.
that is certainly a theory. One of many theories, indeed.
Look, I think that there was a serious opportunity. Like my expectations were set here with those two people debating those topics. I was like, dude, the evidence that we're going to get to see from both sides, because I need to understand both sides of the argument to make a decision in these things. Like what was my choice going forward in life, right? So you have to be able to adjudicate reality, and that's a skill you can build up. So I expected Candace to offer some evidence, and Andrew's audience is like, I didn't know that didn't exist or existed or whatever. Likewise, vice versa. And then we all grow from that, right? And some of those people might even switch sides because they're like, dude, if I had known that there's no gunshot residue test and nothing to tie Tyler to a firearm that day, period, why didn't they do the test? How could you afford not to do the test? Who was fired for not doing the test? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, down the line. And defense lawyers would just have lists of questions that just out of water. If he had a legitimate defense, I don't know that he does. Patsy's would not get a legitimate defense. This is one of the things you can tell over time. Like, hey, here's this person who probably didn't do that thing. but it's not brought up in trial. Oh, those facts were excluded from the trial. Oh, those witnesses weren't allowed to testify at the trial, et cetera, et cetera. You might not find those facts from that investigation in the 9/11 commission report because they weren't, they ran out of pages in the book, and they had, there's
I mean,
all
the
these
ones
types
they
of things. Yeah.
pre-wrote before to make sure the
Yeah.
evidence they have fit
The
into it.
guy who comes up with public myths.
Zelikow? Philip
Yeah,
Zelikow?
Zelikow.
Oh, the same
You know,
guy
he
who had
came
the
in with
COVID commission as well?
with an
Oh.
outline. Who doesn't come prepared to such investigations?
I'm
Quincy always had the outline of how the thing's going to work out. He's like, look, on page 23, then I catch you. Then we cut to commercial for Senka. This is how it works. You just pick it up from watching a little TV. All right. So I want to go to this next clip, and then we'll have time to comment before Tony parachutes out tonight, because he also has a big day doing stuff tomorrow. So did you have any other comments before we go to the next clip, T?
I did have one other thought, but I can't remember it, so I might come back.
Got to
to
write
it
them down.
later on.
You got to use the note cards, man. Par scale, Farah.
I used to use note
yourself.
cards
Give
all
yourself
the
a
time,
chance.
but different. I'm in a different situation now. But yes, I actually, one point I wanted to make was about evidence. There's a lot of parallels between this event and 9/11 or other similar like events in regards to the crime scene itself. You take
I
the
agree.
methodology of a forensic scientist and you tell them what is that methodology applied to any sort of crime scene. I mean, any crime scene. We're not saying specific ones. I'm sure it might change based on the context of the type of crime committed. But in this case, what are the general rules, the most universal rules, no matter that are despite the type of crime taking place, that you would follow when dealing with a crime scene? It seems like every one of those probably was broken same way in 9/11. I mean, that's itself raises
Destruction
a lot
of
of
the
questions.
evidence immediately after the fact. It was
Shows
paved over in
intent.
Charlie Kirk, and Giuliani shipped it to China.
Yeah. But what about those hard drives too? They went to Germany and then just disappeared.
The recovered hard drives from the World Trade Center, or are you talking about the hard drives inside the cameras, which might be called memory cards?
How about I'll take both.
How about the first responders? Some of them seem to know, some of them seem to not know. Like they had medics on the scene run into the SUV with the orange bag, and they're like, no, we're all set because we're going to do CPR across the seats in here and save it. Like none of that stuff makes sense. You don't move the guy from the scene. Like he was already shot. If you don't plug that hole, he's definitely dead.
Correct.
Beyond
like
he might have been
hit an artery or
unsavable.
something. Like it was, he was bleeding
Yeah.
profusely. Like it was a tiny, tiny hole, which anyone understands basic ballistics. At least you have to ask the question, like a 30-06 at that range hit directly usually does not. I mean, we've never seen a situation where it produce a hole like that. So, and replications of that by ballistics experts online have only proven that. So there's a lot of questions at the outset that run counter to or in contradiction of the official story as it was stated. Very similarly, how quickly did they tell us that it was Osama bin Laden and his network of terrorists that they call Al-Qaeda, which means
within minutes, and they never had to change their story ever since.
Oh, interesting.
They're pretty good. 33 hours, and you got your guy.
33, huh?
But they didn't have to use Flock or any of their surveillance data to really catch him, because he turned himself in to the detective that plays online as a young boy who posts chats on Discord and texts and stuff like that to entrap predators.
So he's doing
that guy's
Chris Hansen thing.
Well, let's just say that there
FBI
is a
style.
guy of the same name who was caught by Chris Hansen, but they're not the same guy, as far as I know.
Makes sense. It's the CIA's version.
It's a common name. All right, so Art of Assassination and Patsy's aside, let's go to the second. The second clip is called "What Would Convince You?" This is a question like chain of custody of the evidence is a big one, and tying the perp to the scene with the weapon. It's like a game of Clue. You ever play the board game? You got to say who did it in the room with the candlestick, and you got to work out some logic. When they hand you the story on a silver platter and you didn't have to use any logic and look anything up to figure it out, I call that indoctrination, not education. And oftentimes you can look into that and say, oh, wow, that's interesting. That this guy who turned in Tyler Robinson is a family friend who's in the church. Like there's a lot of connections that they didn't really tell you. And you have to ask the question. It begs the question, which is not a fallacy unless you're using it to reason. If you're using it to ask yourself, inquire, to get education, then it's an actual tool of learning. So it begs the question, how long have they known each other? What type of relationship did they have? Have they ever had time alone? Is there any evidence of activity that might tie these Discord chats and these people who do these things in precarious, furry conditions with other people who, I don't know, have overlapping Venn diagrams in this murder investigation, which seems to be unsolved to the point of beyond reasonable doubt? But maybe in this clip, we will see some evidence that helps us shift and say, you know what, that dude definitely deserves the death penalty, because that's what we do around here. We hold people accountable for their actions. And next, after that death penalty, which Utah did their firing squad thing the week before Charlie Kirk was killed. So they already brought back, like they could have Tyler standing there getting shot, 21 gun salute soon. Just saying, we played the clip. You can find it in gtw.clipgenie.com. The week of the assassination, I said they just brought back the death penalty the week before the big assassination happened in their state. It's convenient timing for someone who's going to be on death row and probably assassinated on their television channel. Anyway, we have to get to this next clip. It's called What Would Convince You? It comes to us via PBD Valuetainment.
Candace, one question. What evidence do you need to see for you to say Tyler Robinson killed Charlie Kirk?
That's a great question. So I actually expected in this preliminary hearing, actually almost the inverse of what he was saying is true, right? So this is now the time the state is putting on their evidence. That's the purpose of this hearing, right? The state is using hearsay, but they're also putting on their evidence. So I was just expecting some sort of a slam dunk. Like, we got him on camera taking the shot. At least we have him clear on camera. You're telling me this guy drove 13 hours all around. Like, we can definitely show you a picture that it's going to be beyond a reasonable doubt. Before we even get to the trial, people are going to see and go, oh crap, like it was really Tyler Robinson. I was expecting to at least see evidence that, because I had reported early on that the source was saying that Tyler did not step foot on campus that day. It is my perspective that he had something to do with something. I do believe he was disposing clothes at this stage, at this phase. I do believe he was disposing clothes. He was involved somehow. I find Lance to be more suspicious, if I'm being honest with you. And also, like I said, the use immunity that was given to Lance by the feds, the fact that the feds didn't ask him any questions, the fact that I spoke with Lance Twiggs' family, and they were like, it's very weird that the feds are not asking him more questions. He's exactly the person that I would imagine to be involved in some stuff. Allegedly, I'll say allegedly. But when we got to the preliminary hearing, there was not a single piece of evidence that I felt was slam dunk. I was waiting for that, a photo. I mean, anything would have made me go, all right, I think this could be the guy. If they had handed over the discovery on the text messages, since that was their big, ta-da, we've got the text messages, that would be the first thing that I would hand over. But actually, who was holding them up, like I said, it wasn't the prosecution. They're right to say we were handing things over, and we heard the defense argue on behalf of the prosecution, saying it's not them and it's not the SBI, it's the FBI that's holding on to things. Is the FBI took everything. The FBI took the gun. The FBI took initially the screwdriver. And then when I heard testimony about the things that they found that were suspicious, example being the backpack, that's something that really bothers me, that they say they traced the shooter, they traced the route that he went on, and then there was an abandoned, we know it looks like he's wearing some sort of a backpack. We know that there was an abandoned backpack found at the bus stop in front of a library, and they felt that this should be taken into evidence. They took it. The FBI, this was the testimony of Amanda Baker, I believe her last name is, but you might want to fact check that because I think I'm blending last names. She was the forensics for the FBI. And then she says she gets a call on the 13th and they stop testing on this backpack because they find that the backpack actually belongs to somebody on Charlie's team. But if you know the map of the layout of the campus, you're going, well, what the hell are they doing all the way up? This is nowhere near anywhere. And by the way, that's not an acceptable answer for why you just gave it back. That's like, why would you give it back? You're acting like no one's ever been killed by somebody on their team before, right? So I found that to be very strange that it was on the exact route that the alleged gunman ran, and that their excuse was we just gave it back because we heard that this belonged to somebody on Charlie's team. So that to me is, this is why the investigation itself feels underwhelming. When you learn, and this is completely crazy to me, that some of the artifacts that Charlie was wearing were immediately returned to Erica. That's absurd. That is absurd. Everything should be in evidence. when you learn that the car that they carried Charlie in to go to the hospital, they had immediately towed, cleaned, and back up for resale. That's absurd. That should be sitting in evidence. And any police officer that you speak to will say, or a person that's been involved in a crime will say, I didn't get my stuff back for years. That had nothing to do with anything. It was just around. And they kept it into evidence until the trial was over and it has to be approved. I think somebody said by the attorney general has to sign off on giving you those objects back. And we were told this is all fine. And we see, this is just one example, Erica holding the crucifix. That should be in evidence. Irrespective of if you feel bad for her and think she should have, have it and it's sweet, that should be in evidence. Immediately paving over the crime scene. This is like the craziest thing ever. This like defies common sense. You immediately, and when you heard the guy who did it actually go up on a podcast and explain, I got the call. They said it was a paver emergency. I've never in my entire career heard of a paver emergency. They had already had someone come up and dig up the dirt. So by the time he got there on Sunday, the dirt had already been dug up for him to lay down pavers. That is what people are looking at and going, this is weird. There needs to be answers for why this was done. And he tells us the call came from the feds and the governor's office. UVUs washed their hands of it. And what he's saying sounds true because we heard during the testimony, one person described the regions of who was in control of everything. Mm-hmm. The feds were in control of the courtyard. So in order for anybody to have paved anything, that was federal territory, so to speak. I'm maybe not using that in the best cop term, but the feds were in control of the courtyard. So these are things that I think should be answered for. Why are we doing things differently than you would in any other criminal scenario of keeping the evidence until we know more, until we're confident, the various decoys, I did it. It just doesn't look right.
Okay, so go back to the question. So what would you need to see for you to say?
Something, if they had, I was expecting, here we have him, he took the shot, here it is. And then I'd be like, great, a clear image of him on the staircase where I'm like, that's definitively Tyler Robinson and he was on campus. We got nothing. We got literally nothing but hearsay of people saying.
But you basically get no case.
What?
You basically no case on planet Earth. You get the,
sure.
Oh, we got a picture.
Okay,
Here's him with the murder weapon.
Right.
Here's him taking the
but
shot.
Most of this doesn't take place on a college campus that has surveillance everywhere.
Yeah.
One clear image of his.
But I don't understand when you're
his
asked.
car plates.
If you're asked the question, what would it take to convince? It'd be the same question be asked to me. Andrew, what would it take to convince you that the oppositional is
Patsy.
True? Right? That he's a patsy or something like that. Just good, clear, concise evidence that's been presented, right? And is being presented that I could go through and link all together to see if there's actually some clear picture of there being a patsy. That's what it would take for me.
Okay.
Just
I don't disagree with that. We haven't heard the defense
just
respond.
a good evidentiary standard. And then, of course, I would change my mind.
So just to qualify this, so there is a possibility in the next few months that you may come out and say, guys, it's done. Tyler killed him. Yeah. So you're saying yes to that.
Yeah.
I think it's very important for the audience here. That from
Without question.
For you, is there anything that you could see for you to say, yeah, this guy was a patsy?
Of course, I'm going to always follow evidence.
Perfect.
So my whole thing is just this. It's really important to me. I don't mind people being truth seekers and justice searchers, and the internet has helped solve tons of crimes. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that, right? However, there's also people who, they not only don't solve crimes, but they just come up with conjecture and what's called flooding the zone. You flood the zone with tons and tons of conspiracy-based ideas and they go nowhere, right? And in fact, they actually take away from legitimate investigation. Now, I'm not even saying anybody here is purposely flooding the zone. That's not even the claim. All I'm saying is that the claims made absent, this is just me not being convinced by the state's evidence. Those become claims, and claims have to be defended. Just like mine have to be defended, yours have to be defended. And that's what we're going to get to now, yeah?
When we set out to create a shoe that blends comfort, function, and luxury, we had the choice to make it fast. We had the choice to make it cheap. We chose neither. Instead, we chose Tuscany, Italy. We chose true Italian craftsmanship, each pair touched by 50 skilled hands. We chose patience, spending 2 years perfecting every detail, and we chose the finest quality at every step. Introducing the Future Looks Bright collection. Not rushed, not disposable, not ordinary. Rather, intentional, luxurious,
cut that.
timeless.
I was too busy taking notes. I'm like, oh, there's that ad going on right there. All right, let's get Tony's perspective on this, and then we'll talk about flooding the zone and backpacks. Oh, are you
Am I
muted?
just general? No, I'm here.
Yeah, I mean, like,
just,
yeah, you're
yeah,
good if
I
you got
mean,
notes.
to me, that was more pleasantries and platitudes. Like, oh yeah, we both agree that evidence. Like we're going to follow the evidence, and we're going to be scrupulous when it comes to the presentation of such, and adhere to truth over all other considerations. Awesome. I applaud both of them for saying those things. Now I await the actions to see how either of them um, perform. Or adhere to that truth when the evidence, if it ever gets released. I think more to Candace's point, much of the evidence we could have had is lost forever. Reminds me of a certain situation we were just talking about. So there's a dearth of evidence in certain contexts. Smoking gun-like evidence, by the way, evidence beyond a reasonable doubt that could easily prove a chain of sort of logical deduction that would show that it would be without outside of reasonable doubt, this is the case, that this is logically what took place. All of that, much of that was destroyed. So that's very curious and very strange. So for Andrew to come out and say, oh, I agree. Oh, but it's very, I thought it was disingenuous, by the way. Just have to say this, that he said that it's unlikely that in most cases there's clear, concise video evidence. That's not the case over the past, I don't know, there's been decades. Many murder trials, many criminal trials since the advent of, modern security cameras, but especially since smartphones. Like there's much more concise and clear evidence than we've ever had before when it comes to the trials that aren't politically motivated, it seems like. That's just a speculation I'm making there. But it's not like,
Do you remember when they had the correspondence dinner and they had the guy running through and it was so blurred out and they didn't give the real footage to the public and everyone wants to speculate and people made AI memes? That is not necessary, and that's the purposeful creation of public dissent to distract people from an investigation instead of showing them clearly, here's who did it, here's why they did it, everybody go back to work.
and even if it were true, which I don't believe is the case in the modern world. I believe if you were to look at a history of criminal trials involving maybe murder or even things like manslaughter or whatever, like there's so much video, unfortunately, because of our sort of technocratic dictatorship being sort of the infrastructure of which being sort of installed around us, around the world, exported from China, surprisingly. You have the situation where that it's more and more unlikely. Like, first of all, the claim that it's unlikely to have clear evidence of any type that could link someone to a particular crime, I think is unfounded. I think in most situations, well, let me put it this way. I think it's reasonable hypothesis to assume that whether in a large minority or a small majority of situations, there's much more straightforward evidence, and we'd like to believe largely due to, unless it's sort of inadmissible due to some sort of constraints based on procedure of the law when it comes to taking security camera footage from some private area. I don't know. Like, I think all that's been, but I'm just making a point. Besides any of those contingencies, let's say, it's unlikely. So that's number one. But number two, even if it were the case, even were to say, yeah, it's unlikely that we're going to get clear, concise evidence from video cameras, security cameras, phones, whatever. That's in an area that is highly monitored in a 360 sort of panopticon-like fashion with video cameras, because it's on a university campus at a marquee speaking event in a central area, in that sort of grotto area where the whole thing was conducted and knew it was going to be staged. Not necessarily his death, but just the speaking event that he was doing.
Well, that brings
day.
up the disclosure of when was it publicly announced that Charlie Kirk was going to be there? When was it publicly announced that he was going to speak at that venue, such that Tyler Robinson could allegedly go to Google Maps and do his scouting and recon, and then know magically how to get through an unlocked door to a roof access at a university that he doesn't go to?
See, these are all important contextual questions, right? That'll aid into understanding evidence beyond a reasonable doubt or showing evidence beyond a reasonable doubt. But those contextual clues are missing. And that's sort of the point, is like, even if we assume that that comment by Andrew is correct, that most times most criminal trials don't have this smoking gun evidence, which I challenge. But even in that case, it's unlikely in this context that's the case, because it's surrounded by kids at a university, young adults, adolescents, late adolescents, young adults, that have camera phones surrounded by, sophisticated security cameras all throughout that could capture anything with, if I remember correctly, weren't there? Oh no, that was the Trump assassination.
Look at the flock
Oh.
map. Look at the flock map and look at his travels that day, whether it's Candace saying he went to the place or not. Like between his house and the place at the university he didn't go 3 hours away, there's a lot of flock cameras there, and they could have tracked him. They could have tracked him when he bought the ammunition. They could have tracked him when he went to the range and practiced. They could show us all sorts of stuff, show us credit card receipts. Yeah, they got the AI Palantir. They could do the whole thing. They're not doing that.
Correct.
And I think if he was guilty, they would be doing that. And then be like, we swabbed him for GSR, and then we tied him to the gun, and then here's him with the gun in the clear 4K video, and you can clearly see his face and all the things that are missing.
Just like at the White House
Yeah.
Correspondence Center you mentioned. Same thing. I
Mhm.
mean, it's just like
Yeah.
you have more
very similar.
security. Yeah.
Almost as if there's like a third party that's involved in all these things. It's interesting if you create a geopolitical stage on which you create war through deception. Wait, I'm sorry, that's the motto of the Mossad. I think they have that trademarked. I can't use it. Let's talk about this backpack
I mean, the
that was
house
found. Yeah, the Hasbar. They have a huge. They had a like $1 billion Hasbar
Oh, I know.
increase in budget. Man, it's like
I know.
they use the. It's like their official word. They got a Hasbar budget to convince other people. of
And
the
they believe
truth.
it's sanctioned in their theology, for those that follow the theology, that
Palestine is a territory. Israel is a people. There you
Yeah.
go. But the guy who pointed that out, he doesn't live anymore.
But
That
like
guy,
the
Joe.
ability to use unethical techniques, unscrupulous methodologies and methods and so forth to gain, like that's to ascertain what you believe is rightly yours. That's sort of sanctioned within their belief system. It's a unique situation with creating.
Thou shalt not steal, and all the 10 commandments is not a Zionist thing.
Well, it doesn't apply if you read the Talmud. It applies only for certain people. Rules for thee, not for me, sort of thing. Those rules apply, yes, internally for them. Do they apply outside of their specified tribes?
Now, best practices and standard operating procedure, Tony, in a murder investigation mean that you're going to hold some personal effects, items that might have been on the person, phone, for all the forensics and whatnot you can gather, especially if he's had threats made on him. There might be evidence to finding those people. This backpack was also returned before going under forensic tests because it just belonged to someone from TPUSA. You know what that's like? That's like the 9/11 trades, and they stopped investigating because they said, no, it's not Al-Qaeda. It's an institutional investor that had the foreknowledge of American Airlines intersecting with Marsha McLennan on 9/11. They don't have to look into it because it's an institutional investor. It's not Al-Qaeda, so they don't need to look into it. Just like they don't need to look into the backpack. It's TPUSA's backpack. No one from TPUSA might have had means, motive, and opportunity to participate or experience in another army, for all that matters, right? He's not surrounded by a whole circle of people who know what's up more than he does, because they know what their role is in a structure that he doesn't even know where his money comes from, and he found out, apparently. So the backpack, I'm just pointing out that's not standard operating procedure. The shell on the shell casing that's on top of the other building that's kind
The
of in a
metallurgy,
line of sight.
we're associated
Yeah, I mean,
with
there's a
it,
line of
yeah.
sight from that building as well. And there's shell casing. So I find that conspicuous enough to be like, maybe there were two shooters, because there's guns from two different, like there's bullets from two different guns claimed at the scene. You got 223 and a 30-06.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. Now, flock and UVU camera coverage, like that's just nonsense that they can't give you. Flock camera and trace his car and do the whole thing. They had to use people's ring doorbells, everybody. Okay, I'm just pointing out. And there's like 3 people in the car, not him. Clear picture. If it's not Tyler, that would equal a patsy. Let's just simplify it and like go, instead of 4 8s, we're going to write 1/2. If there's reasonable doubt that the guy you have on trial for death penalty is not the guy, that means the murderer is out there at large, which means if people hid information to create that situation to allow the real murderer or murderers to get away, they would be accessories to the crime. They'd be participating in a cover-up. That would mean he's a patsy by definition. So I do see a reason to have the debate, I guess, The absence of evidence is not evidence, and you can't prove a negative. Let's go to the next one. Flooding the zone with conjecture, like straw men that weren't mentioned by anybody in the debate, but brought up and then said, that's not making a point and or making a claim. So I guess that was just like what you do when you're thinking to go forward. I get it. The bullet breaking up in midair. I was curious because Andrew does have firearms experience, NRA instructor, all that sort of good stuff. When he talked about the possibility, I think it was like, for all we know, the bullet could have broken up in air. No.
Are we back
I
to
have
Arlen Specter and the magic bullet theory? I mean, that sort of nonsense where it's like now we can defy physics by soft muscle tissue that can somehow repel the
It's the
trajectory.
physics, Tony. If your skin breaks with 3 foot-pounds, and this is 2,800 foot-pounds, that means you take 2,800 pounds and you condense it down to 1 square foot, and it's like an elephant's foot stepping on something, and that's a lot. And so now you're putting that all that energy in that little tiny projectile coming like 2,000 feet per second or whatever, right? So now that enters into the young man's body, and it either hits flesh, bone, arteries, who knows, stuff inside a human being, right? So let's just take the biggest bones in the area. Maybe the scapula. That's a pretty big bone in the back of the back, and the bullet's lodged. Nope. And even at that, stopping that much pressure coming in is going to, like, let's say the spine stops it and it fragments and it doesn't exit. You'd have seen a big thing come out the back of his head while his body adjusted to that pressure being distributed throughout his body, physics wise. Right. If you've ever shot ballistic gelatin, you can see the physics of the bullet kind of in slow motion. And then they got those cameras today that do all the frames per second. You can really study that down. And you can see that when a bullet goes into a cavity, there's gas in there, and it like, and it'll do a little explosion inside of the cavity. And that's a secondary, right? So there's a whole bunch of things about, wound care and treatment,
Pressure,
and how the things
volume
work.
displacement. I mean, even if the bullet doesn't go out, there's something that will, because there's still material in the body in this place, like muscle, you have, blood, mucus. I mean, all sorts of things that can explode out the back that, if you want to argue that the bullet didn't go through, you'd still see some, because
something's getting dislodged.
Cause and effect, equal and opposite, Newton's third law, right? So
now let's say you don't know physics from high school, but you do own a 30-06. I challenge you to take your gun out to the range or some safe place this week and put up some targets. Maybe take a, $10, meat's more expensive than it used to be, right? But, do some tests on your own, because if you own that gun and you've taken shots with it and you've hit things with it, you probably understand as a marksman or, a aficionado of the Second Amendment that does not make sense. So it's almost like, now I'm not saying this is what it is. In the words of Andrew Wilson, this is not a claim, but it's almost like somebody else made up a story. And in that story, they said, we're going to have the guy use a popular sporting rifle that almost every American family hands down generation to generation. Okay. Cool. Then you might see some other dialogue in there that reads kind of funny when translated to English, because it wasn't written in English, as opposed to Operation Grim Beeper carried out by Israel, where they used covert technology to assassinate people. That was written in English for the comedy of it. That wasn't that's not Operation Grim Beeper is not translated from Hebrew. Operation Grim Beeper is written in English by people who speak 2 languages. It is like Where's Daddy and Lavender and other things that
like
are tested in Palestine.
They're pretty conspicuous when it comes to
they're proud of it.
Activity. Exactly. Yeah, they own it.
That's why they give Trump a golden beeper and a plane from Qatar.
Surprised the beeper isn't shaped like an Ark of the Covenant. Oh wait, that said Mar-a-Lago. My bad.
Hamas leadership lives in Qatar.
Yeah.
Bibi sends Hamas leadership $35 million a month to support Hamas and control the flame, as he said in those leaked tapes.
We talked about
Trump takes plane from Qatar after Israel has that relationship and blows up people with technology. Seems like a great idea. Not a national security risk at all.
Galvanize.
Go hide in a catering truck, bro.
Yeah, right. Well, better way to galvanize troops on the ground in Iran than to do something absurd like that. But, anyways.
It's the baby. They took the babies from the incubator and they put them on the floor. That's what I
That
heard.
makes
And
sense.
that's
Yeah.
why he got in a catering truck.
What was the
The
marketing
bullets
firm
breaking up
that
in
did that?
midair. So I'm going to just forgive that as like, I think Andrew's in heat of debate. And he said a thing that, if he had a second take on it, he probably wouldn't have said that thing. So I'm not going to try to hang him out to dry for that thing because I don't think it's substantial. I don't think it happens in reality. I don't. I think bullets fragment when they hit things. It's like a Newtonian physics thing, the first, second, and third rules.
Typically,
And
air resistance isn't enough to fractionate a bullet.
so there's these things that exist, and they are objective and they are measurable. And I would challenge if anyone has an experiment where the bullet comes apart midair, have at it. It doesn't really change how I think or the evidence that's missing that should be there. Do you see what I'm saying? So we can dismiss as arbitrary and move on, save a lot of time, and still be like, hey, why did the police break their protocol? And why don't they have all the evidence that would actually be needed to assume, not to assume guilt? We know guilt because there's this evidence. We don't have to assume, and the person's life is on the line. What would you want if you were on the death row for a situation that you met? Like, dude, I read some text. We were playing a game and he told me to come over. Like, you don't know what type of
Yeah.
text that kid was sent to put him at a location. They could have said, hey, we need someone up on the roof with binoculars to spot just in case, because Charlie's had threats and you're on the inside text group and you can be there at this time. And we don't know because we don't have chain of custody over the key pieces of evidence that you would use to adjudicate a murder case.
Correct.
Don't you find that strange? How did Tyler Robinson do that, by the way? You can ask the same thing about 9/11, insider tradings. How did the hijackers do that? How did they have command and control of an institutional lender that also had a guy that was number 3 at CIA when the trades go on? Insider trading, anybody? No. It's much easier to believe these guys with box cutters did all this stuff than to figure out that there's some corrupt people in our government. Maybe we should look out for ourselves over here before killing millions of people overseas. But that's just me.
I just
We
want to
do
know
have
how
one more
they
clip,
understood
Tony.
the continuity of government piece of it. I mean, they seemingly
Rex
were very
84.
prepared. Yeah, Rex 84. That's another curious piece. Then there's obviously um, John O'Neill, Securicom, is that Marvin Bush? That whole thing. So
Kroll
there's
Associates.
Kroll
Yeah, I mean, what
Associates,
Tony
of
was
course.
referring
Yeah,
to there is on the morning of 9/11, there's a number of war games and drills going on, and there's an E-4B Doomsday plane in the air with Brent Scowcroft during the time of continuity government for 9/11 while Bush is down in the Florida, reading the My Pet Goat to the kids of the school.
with the
And
upside
his
down
dad-
flag and shit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And his dad, the former president, the ex-president, is sleeping in the White House that night.
Is that Skull and
and going to a
Crossbones,
Carlisle
former
meeting with the
ex-president?
Bin Laden
Oh.
brothers the next morning. So it's like, yeah.
That's so strange. I mean,
It's
how
a thing.
strange. Just coincidence, isn't that? Can I say one quick thing before the next clip?
Yeah.
Absence of evidence may not. So you can't prove a negative with a negative, but at the same time, absence of evidence can show something. It can show that the claim or propositions that are brought forth about an event that took place, such as the assassination of Charlie Kirk, may not be credible, may be filled with holes, contradictions, and so forth. So if there's an absence of evidence that clearly either contradicts or shows or is curiously goes missing that could have been used to bolster the claims of those making, projecting that premise and those propositions to support it. I'm just saying that doesn't, we can't use it to say, therefore Israel or therefore Egypt, or therefore whatever, crazed leftists. We can simply but it can say something. It is evidence for one thing that maybe the claim being argued for in the positive, in this case, that Charlie Kirk was assassinated by Tyler Robinson is false, or the least likely, if nothing else, if not directly false, the least likely of scenarios because of the lack of evidence. So it is saying something. People love to throw that around. I see it all the time. Absence of evidence is not evidence. Yes, of course, it's not evidence, but it can be used to show that the evidence being presented is itself an absence of evidence because it can't be bolstered by supporting context and pieces that you
about this?
have rightfully pointed out, and Candace and many others.
Yeah. The absence of evidence could be like the missing SD cards until they're turned over to the FBI, if there's a
Correct.
chain of custody on the whole thing, right? It's
That's
just interesting that somebody would enter a murder scene, step on a chair, do all that stuff, almost as if they didn't care about the human being whom they worked for, who is probably in critical condition, if not dying or dead. But instead, it's like, oh, I don't know. Anyway, I don't want to second guess because I wasn't there. And those are all human beings, and people who don't do things in the know are just innocent bystanders to those who might be taking covert actions to protect a nation state that had its defense systems down and was about to go down for the count, which can't, it's an unacceptable Samson option type of thing. And so if they need to make a call and say, hey, Donnie, we're going to hit your favorite guy and, pay attention because maybe they'll shoot closer to him next time. There is something afoot because you have multiple assassination attempts with common things that aren't accounted for by the people blamed for the things.
I have not researched or done anything here, so I'm just saying this in complete absurd
Sure.
speculation. But the Lindsey Graham situation, well, if I was someone who wanted to project this type of power, and this goes back to Whitney Webb and when we did the book club many years ago. But the three levels of the way in which they compromise individuals: first is simply just pay them, bribe them. Number one. Number two, blackmail. Number three, kill them. So if Trump's having second thoughts about his little excursion in the Middle East, or I'm just saying this pure speculation, just having this idea crafting, whatever, what better way to assert power than by killing close people around him, people that he knew, people that he interacted with? I'm just saying. Now, I'm not saying there's any way or shape or form has anything to do with Lindsey Graham. I'm just noting that there is a pattern, right? And the pattern could be just a patternicity fallacy, patterns without meaning. But in this case, there is. To your point, interestingly, how would you pressure someone in a position of power to do certain activities or make certain decisions? This could be certainly one of them. It certainly has been. That was tactics of the mafia, right? Don't go after the man, go after the family. That is a classic mafia tactic because the person will then capitulate. One, they're fearful for their own life, but then they're obviously, if they're a decent person, going to be fearful of their family and someone doing something. So they're willing to do heinous, absurd acts either to protect their family, or protect their loved ones and so forth. So I think we have to consider that as a possibility, considering there's a precedent set in organized crime of the way in which you influence powerful people.
Well, I mean, they could have got Lindsey Graham. He could have been overseas at the Bullington Club, and there's a whole. Actually, Jared Kushner's a member of that club. I should bring that up later tonight because there's a
That's
club
interesting.
of men who know how to
I
keep
know
secrets.
nothing about the Lindsey Graham situation except
Two
that I
prime
woke up one
ministers
day.
go through there. Some Rothschilds. It's interesting stuff. All right. I just wanted to point out that in things like 9/11 and JFK, you have a situation where it's like murder on the Orient Express, and there's 10 suspects, and they all have a motive, and they all have means and
Yeah.
opportunity, and they probably got together and said, you know what? Let's share the risk, so none of us can be held accountable, and everybody takes a little risk, and then nobody goes
Sure.
down because everybody would go down, and that's how organized crime has run for thousands
But
of years. Just
that's
pointing it
literally
out.
Candace's sort of, you want to call it an expose. Her research shows that. Much of her research shows you have everything from Egypt to the France to the United States and the FBI to,
Well, let's
Charlie
just pause
Robinson. Some of
pause
this,
there real quick.
to your
So
point, that's how
Egypt,
you would.
when I hear
Yep.
Egypt, I think a place that has been a British protectorate since World War I under
Specializations
colonization,
and
and then
assassination.
the United States has paid Egypt to be cool with Israel the whole time. So they're
Yep.
Anglo-American. And has
Abraham
Israel ever
Accords.
run ops out of Egypt? Yes, they have.
Yes, they
Operation
have.
Susanna. Like this is a whole thing with the Mossad. So there's a
You
whole
got it.
thing there. In France, what do I think? I think the French Rothschilds were instrumental in colonization of Palestine in the 1880s, and the British Rothschilds delivered the Balfour Declaration. Together, they got a non-nuclear nuclear nation state that has a Samson option and likes to use Epstein and Robert Maxwell blackmail techniques while also putting software and backdoors into your judicial software, to name a
Thomas
few
software style.
off the top of my head.
No, you're exactly. I mean, that's the point. Exactly. But it also distributes the cost, right? It makes it one sort of like the same way BCCI set up a bunch of shell companies, really hard to trace
You
the
mean
money.
Clark Clifford, the lawyer who set up National Security Act in 1947, later participated in the Bank of Commerce and Credit International scandal, which was a
That's
big
correct.
drug money, arms, narco terrorism network.
That's right. That's right. And now, why do you do that? Why do you set up such a complex network in order to be able to hide or at least muddy the waters of how money is flowing? Same thing with assassination. If someone wants to call in a hit, you have to distribute the sort of plausibility of it, or the responsibility. You have to distribute the responsibility of it, and like who is making that decision. And one of the ways you do it is exactly the way you described, which makes it so seemingly absurd for the average person who lives an average life. They, the idea that there's this very connected network that can facilitate such events seems to be impossible to imagine when you realize it actually really isn't. It's actually much easier to facilitate, but you have to understand history. Number one, you have to understand how these institutions have arose, like the financial backing of these institutions, like who funded the Likud, or excuse me, not the Likud party. I'm sorry, the Knesset. The Knesset. I'm just saying. What about the Palestine Exploration Fund?
James de Rothschild.
James de Rothschild, but the Exploration Fund just for grapes. It's just because they want to grow vineyards.
Well, that was Edmund de Rothschild.
That was the earlier on. I'm just saying, like, who funds these things? Oh, wait, there's a continuity of a certain ideology in place amongst people who fund certain events. I'm just saying, it's easy. Same with the British. The British, it was it Jay Loftus? They set up the Muslim Brotherhood. We took it over after World War II, but they set it up, which are just Muslim hyper-nationalists, really. It's like Muslim
Proxy
Nazis.
patsies?
Proxy patsies. What happened under Operation Cyclone, like 30 years after that, with Brzezinski? Sorry about my camera.
He worked with that bin Laden guy.
Yeah.
Back in the 70s.
Operation Cyclone. And so there's your proxy coming to fruition 30 years later. I mean, there are
just like intelligence working with the mafia in One Nation Under Blackmail, volumes 1 and 2.
That's exactly right.
It's fascinating. I would also point out that they hide it because they know what they're doing is wrong. That's why they created national security, because if you found out, you'd overthrow them. They take violent action because they're intellectually bankrupt, and it's a thing that's gone on throughout human history. So act as if. These are facts. All right. Anyway, let's go to this last clip in this section. This is the valuetainment section. These messages feel off. We're going to be using intuition, or we're going to use logic, reason, rationality. Let's see what happens in this clip, and then we'll comment, and then we'll let Tony tap out and get to his day tomorrow. Tony, I thank you for riding shotgun tonight, and this is the perfect news for us to cover because it's right in your sweet spot. Let's go to valuetainment, PBD, and let's see what Candace and Andrew have to say in this clip.
Right?
Okay.
Let's stay there, and then we'll go into the cross-examination stuff in about 30 minutes.
Okay. That sounds fair. Okay. So, yeah, I used basically 3 pillars for the totality of the evidence. Okay. So if you want to know exactly what those 3 pillars are, this is going to be the testimony with the text messages and the confessions. This is going to be the physical evidence, and this is going to be the totality of the summary of the case. Okay. Mm-hmm. So right now we're focusing on one of these pillars in my defense, which is fine. I understand that I have to defend my claims as well. So when we're talking about the messages themselves, they seem totally valid. I have no idea why they wouldn't be valid. And I have not heard any good explanation for why it is that these messages should even be questioned. The defense hasn't questioned them, as far as I'm aware. Nobody has actually questioned that these messages came from Robinson to date, except perhaps you and other people who are kind of in that camp. Mm. But why should I question these exactly? I'm not sure.
Okay, so first let's just go over legally what the point is of a probative hearing. The defense is not they're not there to say or to argue or to defend themselves at all. They have to address what is being presented by the state, okay? So they're not here to then say, let me give you an explanation for these text messages.
Agreed.
The relevant portion of what the defense did do was actually before we got to the preliminary hearing. I had mentioned that it was initially supposed to be scheduled for some time in May. They asked for an extension. That reading through those filings of why they were requesting an extension and why I actually believe their extension should have been granted because they did not receive discovery on their text messages. That was one of the reasons. There were many reasons why they wanted to have an extension, but this was crucial, right? So forget just the general sense that these messages feel off. And yes, you are allowed to have an intuition. You are allowed to have a sense and just go, this is very weird. We're being told this kid had like above a 4.0, Tyler Robinson. He wanted to get away. I mean, the text messages almost run head to head with themselves. Like he wanted to get away with it. So he thought the best thing to do would be to text a full confession of what he did it felt a little too on the nose. People have common sense. You just don't text message. But then we're also supposed to believe that he put a note under and burn this and get rid of the evidence. But don't worry about that because I'm about to text you a full confession. That it felt off. It felt weird off the bat. The manner in which they were texting, we're told he's like a gamer who's using a Dremel to carve expressions, catch fascist. But then suddenly he's writing like a 1700
Also, as a Helldivers
novelist.
player, he did actually get the 500K code correct.
Yeah, I'm not a gamer, so we'll say that if we start debating that, you'll be way over my head.
But yes,
but my point being is just that, first, it's a general sense of why people had a reaction to these messages that seemed like they were written by Jane Austen rather than like a kid who games and writes catch.
Yeah, but do you see how that's intuition?
That is, I just said that. I said just parking aside the intuition of just something feels wrong here, which you should follow your intuition. You should actually do that. If you say the COVID vaccine is running out, feels like it's coming out too fast and there's too many celebrities telling me to do it, I'd like to take a pause. That's good. That is, you are allowed to do that. I believe in intuition.
But hang on. Let me respond a little bit here because you've been going for a minute. Let me at least respond to a little bit of this. So the first thing is like when people bring up the COVID vaccine, not trusting the COVID vaccine en masse was the science. That wasn't just intuition. That was the science. There was tons of competing science. Now, they tried to suppress it. That's true. But there was tons of competing science for why you shouldn't take a risky mRNA vaccine and masks and things like
they
this.
Kept telling us was 100%.
Now, when you're talking about intuition, though, when you say trust your intuition, I'm actually giving a different message. You actually should be very wary about trusting just your intuition. It is true that intuition can be useful, but it has to be tempered with logic, reason, explanatory power, and evidence, not just intuition.
That's why we're parking it aside. Intuition's the first step. Something feels off, right?
Okay.
That was my first step with COVID. I don't like the way it's being pushed. It shouldn't require a celebrity campaign, by the way. Another element of that is why people don't feel good about the Charlie thing. Why do we have so many influencers saying things? It's over. Why are you guys all using the same adjective? Can you switch it up? I'm overwhelmed. Like, chill. Like, you could say, I found some parts
like
compelling. I think this should go.
Like
I found some parts compelling. Maybe we should, see at the trial. That would be kind of.
Don't you think Fed slop's a buzzword for the counter industry?
But everyone on the same day of watching this trial, which was, I would say, not overwhelming at all. Nobody came in medium, right? No one came in like there were some interesting aspects. This was a little suspect. But I do think it's enough to go to trial. They all came in like they were passing away and we're going to die from being overwhelmed.
Well, they're trusting their intuition.
Okay. Well, actually, in that scenario, they're looking at the preliminary hearing and have a reaction to it. It wasn't their intuition. But like I said, parking aside, just getting to the substance, parking that aside, aside just a general intuition that sometimes might be second messages. Then we look at the filings, which came from the defense, and they were requesting an extension saying, we have gone to the prosecution and we have requested all of this stuff in discovery. Yes, you are saying that you took Lance's phone, okay, and that you collected his phone on September 11th and that you sent it off or whatever. You took a picture of the text messages and we are being given these text messages to review. Crucially, Kathy Nestor said, I have not even been given access to my client's phone during this hearing. She said, I haven't even been given access to my client's phone. She can't tell you, as a part of their discovery request, it's not enough to say to me, Candace, I just got a text message from Candace, and I say, I didn't send that text message. Maybe that's what our client's saying. We don't know because we're not at the trial, right? Maybe he didn't send those messages. Could there be someone who logged into his Discord? Could there be someone who logged in to his Apple? George could be sending text messages right now. We are married. He has every login that I have. And remember, he's up for a death sentence. So if I'm able to sow reasonable doubt with common sense, he may come during the trial and when they actually have to address these points, say, I did not write those messages. I was here. Lance, my boyfriend, was logged into my phone, logged into my Apple ID and my iCloud sending messages. I know that we have the capability because my husband does it. He has the capability to send messages from my phone. It is not convincing to the public when, for whatever reason, the FBI combined with the SBI, it was not the prosecution's fault. They made that clear during that hearing, would not allow them that discovery request to be able to see where did that message come from? Because you're saying my client was here, right? I want to know if that message actually was generated from his iPhone when he was waiting to retrieve his rifle, hoping that the pooch doesn't have a bad sniffer, like just weird messages. I want to make sure that, yes, it was actually him. He was holding his phone and his boyfriend didn't just log in to his computer when he was home. Lance was his boyfriend. That is a crucial fact here. That discovery was not met by the time we got to preliminary hearing. So I remain unconvinced by these text messages. Just as you feel convinced by them, I feel unconvinced by them.
Okay. So then the idea here is the reason that you don't think that these are valid text messages, and you don't, right?
It has not been proven that these messages are valid, and they don't sound valid to me. I don't think anyone, even if someone was selling like a, I don't know, pot on the corner, would be smarter than to write a full-fledged confession. He even writes, I thought I would get away with it, and I was hoping never to tell you until old age. And then we're being told that he wanted to commit suicide. And okay, but he just said he wanted to get away with it, but he's not smart enough to, I don't know, maybe not text it's such a confession like we've never seen. I think this would be like the first time ever somebody has start to finish written an entire, I'm in this surveillance footage and I'm here and I'm wearing my Converse. You know, I'm being a little facetious here, but it was a little ridiculous. It didn't pass a sniff test for me.
You have kids and you
do.
love them more than anything.
I do.
If it was the case that you thought that your kid was innocent, wouldn't you be out telling everybody and their brother that you thought that they were innocent? And also, wouldn't you maybe recant and say, hey, he didn't actually confess to me. He didn't actually, none of this happened the way that the state is presenting it. What would have prevented the parents from testifying?
Well, two things. I can answer that. And if you watch my show, I keep telling you it's not vibes. So right after the shooting happened, Lance Twiggs, the FBI put him into a safe house they paid for. They went to the parents as well, to Matt Robinson and Amber, basically said, your life's at risk. There could be somebody who jumps up and wants to avenge Charlie Kirk. And, we're going to watch you. And they went into a federal safe house. What happened next is that they started thinking that the feds were maybe gonna, maybe not as honest as they thought. And
how do you know any of that?
So you gotta watch the show, right?
Yeah, no. How do you know that?
I had a source within the Robinson family.
You have a source, an anonymous source, of course. So there's no way for us to verify that what you're saying right now is actually even true.
You find it to be reliable hearsay?
No, I don't find it to be reliable at all. It's just a source.
I'm just doing what the prosecution
What you're doing
did.
is a cool story.
It's not cool. Well, you must have hated watching the preliminary hearing.
You're giving us a cool story. Wait, you're saying that according to your sources, that the reason that the parents haven't recanted any of this.
Recanted what? They have no statement from the parents.
Wait, I just want to make sure that if it was the case, it was being reported in mainstream media that your father came to you and said, hey, is this you? What's going on here? And then he and one of his buddies took you in where you turned yourself in. You wouldn't go out and be like, no, that's not what happened.
That isn't what happened, though. You're just wrong on this.
Okay. Maybe I'm paraphrasing. What am I wrong on?
So what is sorry, just so I'm clear, where is your evidence that the parents turned him in?
Well, no. I didn't say that.
You said there's the mainstream media?
I said with a sheriff friend.
Yes.
But the father did confront him.
The father confronted what?
Tyler Robinson.
And where did you learn this? That the Tyler confronted him?
That's part of the official documents. Our fact checkers can pull that up. But yes.
But I'm saying, when you say official documents, do you mean you saw this on CNN or you saw this play out in the hearing?
No, this was one of the things that I went through and fact checked pre-debate.
Are you talking about the charging documents?
I think it could have been in the charging documents, but we can pull them up.
No.
And yes, are you disputing this?
Do we have that on the back to pull it up?
I can already tell you what you're talking about, the charging documents, because this is where we had to figure out where this story came from, because everyone was operating under the assumption that Matt Robinson turned him in. Until we got to the preliminary hearing and we understood, like I said, even for that, when you are charging someone, you can use hearsay. It's all probative, right?
Sure.
Nothing. So they didn't have statements. It's not like Matt Robinson, even though he was interviewed that night. Amber Robinson was interviewed that night by a Fed, separate rooms. Tyler Robinson was interviewed by a Fed. They did not produce statements saying, my son did this. I believe my son did this. But what happened was they did interviews, but also the crucial person here who you just brought up is Mike Mitchell. Mike Mitchell is the biggest unknown in this entire case. Everyone keeps saying they heard from Mike Mitchell this, they heard from Mike Mitchell that. So when the person wrote up the report that night, and it was Brian Davis who wrote up what became the charging document, he after they transported Tyler Robinson from the Washington Sheriff's County office up to, I think it's Salt Lake City, I think it was 4 a.m. in the morning that they got up there. He then writes the what becomes a charging document. So he's basically saying, we all spoke to a bunch of people and here's the information that we got, right? We've not seen that. So it could have come from Mike Mitchell. Mike Mitchell could be saying,
I don't know how this negates the point, though.
it
Why wouldn't
truly
the
negates
parents?
the point because you don't have a statement from the parents.
Yeah,
you are going.
Why wouldn't they just correct the
It's not
the
correcting. That doesn't
misinformation?
negate the point. The point is that we now got the preliminary hearing. If the parents were the ones who said, "I'm turning my son in because he's guilty,"
I didn't say they turned him in.
I think you're talking about the over. You said it's been the narrative. Everybody's known this. The narrative initially, which I think you agree with, was that Matt Robinson knew his kid was guilty and turned him into the police station. What actually happened in terms of Sheriff Brooksby, who was present there and gave a press conference, what happened was this Mike Mitchell character essentially peer pressured him, and we can get a fact check on this. We can find Sheriff Brooksby's press conference, and he said, they know it's you and you're going to come in peaceably or people are going to be banging down your door. He was a undercover cop, which I don't like that. I don't know what he did undercover. It's very hard to find anything about Mike Mitchell, but he worked with them for 20 plus years, the police officers. The reason why Tyler Robinson knew him was because he lived nearby and he was also his Boy Scout
How
leader.
does this negate that the parents could write this second? And by the way, if you had
I'm
the
going to
evidence,
address that point. I'm just saying that your first point, which is that the parents did this.
Yeah.
We don't know that the parents.
I didn't say that they did ever. Never happened.
You're quoting the parents as having said. You said that Matt Robinson said that his kid was. Did you say involved? I don't want to misquote you.
Confronted him about
Confronted him.
Yes.
And I'm telling you that we have not seen any evidence that that is true.
We can fact check that.
Okay.
Because we do have evidence.
And I'm saying it's the charging doc, which could have been derived from a statement Mike Mitchell said.
Two things I have ready in the back. One
Cool.
is the charging doc, and the
Yes.
other one is a video of Kathy Nestor saying she hasn't seen Tyler's phone.
Okay, we can
Okay.
run
Which
Kathy to
one
go
would you
back
wanna
and
see
then
first?
just to
You
go
wanna see
backwards
Kathy
to
first?
Kathy first in court saying she didn't get her client's phone. Yeah, and then I think we'll go to the. If
A
you're
thing
okay with
not,
that.
A thing not in dispute. These are all things that are not even disputing.
Okay, so we don't have to show it.
We never get to the thing that I am disputing.
Well, I was just providing an answer. We were coming back in from a break because you were talking about the text messages as something that you felt was concrete. So it was just my rebuttal to you that it's not concrete because they haven't had a chance to actually answer that. And she didn't even get to see your client's phone. So that's effectively, again, the state saying these messages are real. You don't get the discovery on these messages just yet. She will during trial. They will actually get
Don't you
discovery on the
think
messages.
that would make their case fall apart if it was the case that they weren't able to actually pull the data off the text messages? Do you think the prosecution would go to court with fabricated text messages?
It's called winners and losers. They may not be fabricated, but by the way, as what they are saying, like I said, if there was somebody logged into his phone, they may not be fabricated. That's the point.
So let's get to the
they just could be somebody else.
The parents fact check. That
Yeah,
was
so
the
I
other
was
one,
saying,
right?
I believe what you're talking about was derived from the charging doc, which was signed off by Brian Davis.
Let's pull it up.
Let's see if that's correct. What are we looking at
Robinson's mother explained that over the last year or so, I'm sorry.
Can you zoom in a
here? Is
little
this
bit?
the charging
I
doc?
can't see it. Robinson's
yes.
father reported that when his wife showed him the surveillance image of the suspected shooter in the news, he agreed that it looked like their son. He also believed that the rifle that police suspected the shooter used matched the rifle that was given to his son as a gift. As a result, Robinson's father contacted his son and asked him to send a photo of the rifle, which makes sense with the text messages. Robinson did not respond. However, Robinson's father spoke on the phone with Robinson. Robinson implied he planned to take his own life. Robinson's parents were able to convince him to meet at their home.
Yes. So this is proving my point. This is from the charging document, correct? Yeah. So what I'm saying to you is that 3 people got interviewed on that night. Mike Mitchell got interviewed, Amber Robinson got interviewed, and Matt Robinson got interviewed. Of the 3 of them, only one of them actually wrote a statement, which was referred to in this preliminary trial. He came in, I believe, in March, Mike Mitchell, and he wrote a statement, which I find to be very shady that they decided to bring.
But why aren't the parents disputing that?
No. Well, first off,
That's the question
First
I've
off,
been
the
asking.
parents are not going to ever play in court. Play to the cameras in court when they have a legal team that is going to be advising them not to speak to the court because your son could go to prison
But
forever.
they're playing to somebody else who's your source?
I'm not going to address that.
They're
'Cause
playing to
I don't-
someone
I
else
don't
who's
think-
your
I don't
source,
think
but
it's-
won't go publicly tell the media
yes.
this is not true?
Well, what I did not say to you that I just said I have a source, so I want to be very clear and take it from somebody who was involved and permanently sued. When I have to take my lawyer's advice, I mean, there's so many things that I want to respond to when people are speaking about.
Yeah, but it's bizarre that they would utilize a source which would get the information to you, but wouldn't just go to the media and be like, actually, that's all wrong.
I am telling you that you would nary find a lawyer who would advise you to go to the media.
Oh,
and speak.
this mother.
Especially when your son
If
is up
I thought
for,
that my
is-
kid
was up for death.
If I thought that my kid was in any way, shape, or form going to be up, you couldn't shut me up. Or my wife, she would be like, that's not true. That's ridiculous. There's no possible, that never happened. These people are lying through their teeth. They'd be public whether you like it or not.
Yeah, that's for you and your wife. But when a judge issues a gag order in a case and your son is up for death, and your lawyers could be advising you that if you say anything, you could blow the case, you would have a more responsible consideration.
I see.
And we're speaking opinion here. You're like, well, I wouldn't care. I'd violate it, and I'd violate the judge's orders and see what would happen.
If you have a source, it seems like they're violating it with them.
I'm not speaking to a source, but what I am saying to you is speaking just relevant to what this is. We have not seen any proof that statement that is included in this charging document. I think it is highly likely on the basis of the preliminary hearing that all came from Mike Mitchell. And Mike Mitchell would be a part. He's
based
saying,
on the statements of
it's him saying the parents told me this. The parents could dispute that. That's going to come down the line, right? They're going to be able to seat the parents. I will say this, putting together context clues. If the state had it on, 100% certainty that Matt Robinson and Amber Robinson said it, a 5-day preliminary hearing would be a good time to say we have enough evidence. And I can tell you why Matt Robinson made this statement, and here is his statement that he signed. That would have been a good time to present that evidence.
That would also be a good time for the defense to say that's just totally fabricated.
No, it's not. It's the wrong time.
Why couldn't they?
That is completely the wrong time.
Why couldn't they?
Because what they're doing is they already said they didn't receive discovery. They literally can't. They literally can't because they can't. They did not receive discovery.
You're saying that they didn't receive that information?
No. They just received the text messages. But in order to...
That's not the text messages.
The probative information.
Yeah, we're talking about the information that we just reviewed. That's not the text messages.
They never presented it. The state never put it on.
Yeah, they didn't. The defense could easily still have presented this. Yeah.
No.
They could have said they're
no.
They're not allowed to. Are you sure?
In a preliminary hearing,
yeah.
the defense is engaging with whatever evidence the state decides to put on. They did not put this on as evidence. Brian Davis was up there.
So they're not allowed to present anything?
They're responding to the state's evidence.
I'm asking, are they allowed to present anything?
They are allowed to say...
Like if there was a conspiracy that they could prove right then and there, would they present that in one of these hearings?
No, it wouldn't be the right time for that.
I disagree. I think that they not only could do it, but they would do it. In fact, when I talked in depth with my attorney, they said that's exactly, if you had actual evidence that there was fabrications by the feds, that's exactly when you would introduce that.
When we set out to create a shoe that blends comfort, function, and luxury,
we came up with this shoe and we put "the future is bright" on the bottom of it. All right. I'm still marshaling some of my evidence here because I've got some things that are gaslighty. When you try to look up the key name in that clip, it's the Mike Mitchell character, and there's a lot of people named Mike Mitchell in the world, so it is pretty hard to get evidence on that situation. But there is a paper trail, and we will discuss that. Tony, do you have a list of thoughts you want to cover before I go into marshaling evidence? You might be, yeah, there you go.
No, I'm here. I'm just trying to think. I mean, I could comment on a bunch of different things. I think for the most part, it was a lot of, obviously confusion, but I never, what was the one point Andrew made that really upset me? I think or not upset me, but just made me just be like very confused at what he was trying to argue for or against. Oh, the point about intuition. First of all, they both did a poor job here. From a logical perspective, intuition is essentially pattern recognition that has not been made explicit. What this means is when you get a funny feeling that something seems off, it's because you have, through your experience, wisdom gained through experience, integrated knowledge, have come to learn that that's not the way typically people do confessions. It's not the way people typically speak, maybe in a text message, not the way like a gamer kid would speak with like a 4.0 GPA, all these sorts of things. It doesn't add up because we kind of know from a general context of seeing how those people interact, how they speak, how they write, how they enjoy their free time playing video games, whatever. Like there's a certain sort of lexicon, there's a certain way they engage with people. So like intuition is a part of logic. And she did allude to this after Andrew sort of interrupted her a number of times on this point, that it was to try to discredit her. He interrupted her about this whole issue about intuition to discredit her, when in fact, intuition is one of the chief, and as well as anecdotal evidence as well. Intuition, although two separate things, they both actually come together here insofar as like they're both beginning stages of logic. They both represent, hey, this something seems off. Let me look into something, is essentially what she alluded to eventually after he interrupted her over and over and over again about, oh, it's just hearsay. Oh, it's just your intuition. Oh, you're just going on vibes or whatever. It's like, no, like I used my intuition to then look into the evidence and look into the timeline and so forth to see if it matches up with what my concerns are with reading just the text messages. He just like couldn't get over that. And obviously after that, when you see his, I mean, this might be an aside, but body language wise, I saw his foot flutter quite a bit on his leg there when he crossed over. I was like, this is he getting a little nervous because he couldn't even remember if it was the charging documents from
no,
when
I'll
he
call,
heard. Okay.
I mean, I'm pretty sure his foot's twitching because he used to smoking during a debate, and she's pregnant, and he can't smoke in that room. So I don't think he's nervous. He debates
Okay.
people all the time. You know what I'm saying? I just think it's like an unusual format, and he was more focused on his active listening skills than like paying attention to
fine.
that. But there was a lot of memes, and for people who want
Yeah.
to take that road, you can have fun with memes, but that doesn't attack the substance of the man's argument. So,
No, my point was, and I would never bring that up because that would be an ad hominem against the man. The point, reason why I bring it
well,
up is
it's
that he
only an ad
started
hominem
doing
if
it
you use it as your argument.
right,
If
which
you
I'm
just
not
notice
using
it,
as
it's
my.
not an ad hominem.
Yeah, I just noticed it happened during the point at which he seemed to be unsure. And that might, I did not watch the whole debate. That's a clip of it. So maybe he's doing it before and it's just a nervous
Oh,
twitch. We
he
all
does it
have
the whole
them.
time. No, he
Okay.
does it the
Then in
whole
that
time.
case,
That was the thing. Like
then
there was,
ignore
yeah.
my comment because I haven't watched the debate. I only saw that clip.
Yeah, that's an
I only
observation, not a
noticed that.
judgment.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's fine. Either way. So that's neither here nor there. The point is, regardless of that fact, because I didn't watch the whole debate, I noticed that start to happen. And that's a good example of a patternicity fallacy. It's like, here's a pattern where potentially where he starts to have his little foot quivering when he gets presented with evidence of a contrary nature, evidence he doesn't even quite understand himself. That's not the case. But regardless of the fact, it still showcased that he is trying to be intelligent. He's trying to be understanding to a certain extent. It certainly, I'll give them both credit. They were cordial to a large extent, much better than a lot of online debates I see, and they both present their case. So I'm fairly okay with the way in which it's presented. It's just more egregious on his part, the lack of understanding of some of the key details, such as the Mike Mitchell situation, such as where the accusations come from that, oh, Tyler Robinson's father is the one that turned him in. Well, it comes from the charging document. So it could have been those. Where did you read? Like these little things do add up because it's how much do you understand about it in contrast to those who are doing the research for you? I'm speculating there, but I
mean, I certainly don't have enough interest or skin in the game to bet $300,000 on it.
That's for sure. If I had 300,000, I would have read through those documents so many times. I would have the whole thing memorized.
And even without $300,000 on the line, I could show you stuff like this. Oh, wait, did it not? It doesn't want to come up. Oh, wait, I pressed the wrong button. That's why. Haha. All right, I went over to the web browser because it's an easier format for you guys to see these documents. Now, over here, Tony, I did a Brave search. So I have on the left, I have my mind map model, and I have some of the evidence that I've accumulated over, the past week of checking this out. Mike Mitchell, Charlie Kirk assassination. Brave browser tells me no individual named Mike Mitchell is identified in the available records as a suspect, witness, or participant in the assassination of Charlie Kirk. The man charged with it's telling me Tyler Robinson, and then it's like you might be looking for these people, right? Lincoln Mitchell, Mitchell Hooper, Tyler. AI is like you're easily confused, sir. And look over here. And then I said something to the effect of, did Tyler Robinson test positive for gunpowder residue tests? And no, they didn't even test them. So DNA and fingerprints, I mean, it's a guy's gun. So, of course, that's going to be on there. Inconclusive ballistics results. And these alleged confessions, we're going to get to that in a second, but I didn't see much evidence stacking up. So then I asked Grok, and it says Utah has no specific statute requiring GSR testing of suspects. It is a standard discretionary forensic practice under general evidence rules. So they didn't do that. And then I went over here and I said, hey, Grok. Oh, no, sorry. This is AI from Brave browser. I said, don't gaslight me. That's not true or factual. Detective Mike Mitchell is named as a police online predator catcher, and he is who surrendered Tyler Robinson to the sheriff. And then it's like, oh, you're correct. And I apologize for my error in previous response. The search results confirm that Mike Mitchell is indeed the retired detective and former sheriff who facilitated the surrender of Tyler Robinson in the Charlie Kirk shooting case. And there's a reference. And I'm not sure if that's true because some of these references AI gives you is bullshit. So I'm just taking it in, piece by piece, and I'll arbitrate and adjudicate the evidence in a second. However, search results do not support the claim that he's known as an online police predator catcher. Huh. That's interesting, right? So anyway, it tells me Mike Mitchell's role in Robinson case. He's explicitly identified as a retired deputy sheriff and family friend who coordinated Tyler Robinson's voluntary surrender to the Washington County Sheriff's Office. He is not described as an active online predator catcher in this context, but rather as an intermediary leveraging his law enforcement background and personal relationship with the family. Okay, interesting. Separate predator catcher reference. One article mentions Mike Mitchell was credited in the press accounts from the late 90s and early 2000s with doing undercover work in online chat rooms to catch child predators. This appears to be a past part of his career that is distinct from the 2025 Robinson case. Okay, interesting. So he did facilitate the surrender, and I went to the next document and I said, hey, where can I find articles citing Detective Mike Mitchell, who turned in Tyler Robinson? And so it says, based on the search, there is no information, right?
Wow.
It tells me he doesn't do this, and wait for it because it's in the next slide. Then we go to this one, correction of facts. I was like, don't gaslight me. So it did find it,
Don't
Detective
gaslight
Mike
me, bro.
Mitchell. Yeah, I use it as my second response all the time now. Did facilitate surrender of Tyler Robinson. He has a past history of undercover sting operations targeting predators, which aligns with your description of him as an online predator catcher. The previous confusion arose because the name Mike Mitchell was also associated with a suspect in 2006 Dateline sting, where detective was Mike Burns, leading to an incorrect conflation. So I'm not conflating that, and I'm not incorrect. Let's go to the next one. The evidence confirming Detective Mike Mitchell's history as an online predator catcher in the late 90s and 2000s comes from contemporaneous source news reports detailing his undercover work with the Salt Lake City Sheriff's Department. Oh, that's like in Utah where they took Tyler. Okay, that's interesting because it's the same place. Multiple articles from Deseret News explicitly identified Detective Mike Mitchell as a detective specializing in undercover internet sting operations during this period. Quote, police surf internet to snag pedophiles, November 16th, 1999. The article describes Detective Mike Mitchell allegedly sitting at a desk typing with typos, misspellings, and childlike phrases while posing as a young boy in chat rooms. Boy, I would think that brings reasonable doubt to the client right there if you're on a defense team. It states, quote, Mike Mitchell is not a boy. He's a police detective hunting for a pedophile. End quote. Mitchell was quoted as saying he had been, quote, investigating child sex crimes on the internet for about a year, end quote, at that time, placing a start of his work around 1998. The report details how he would engage suspects in chat, arrange meetings, and then arrest them upon arrival. One specific case involved an international suspect in Europe, which was handed off to the FBI and Interpol. Teen's nosy mom helps nab suspect. May 24, 2001 is an article by Deseret News. This report again cites Salt Lake County Sheriff's Detective Mike Mitchell explaining a case where a mother posed as her son to catch a predator. Mitchell is quoted providing expert commentary on the mechanics of these sting operations and the behavior of online predators. Now, that's only relevant really because there is rumor that Tyler was involved in chat rooms and furries and all sorts of underground texty type things, and other people knew ahead of time. And somebody said, if you listen to the tape from UVU, they had a camera team there. The university had a camera team in there. You can clearly hear someone say, "Get down," right before the shot takes off. And then there's the guy who gets up and starts distracting everybody. And then there's the other guy who said he did it, but he's a big distraction too. And he was involved in 9/11 or some shit like that in the past.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of that stuff that people conveniently they forget about all these other things that happen that contradict the official story. Once they're told the official story, it's like, oh, those things don't exist. And they don't have merit or substance or gravamen on the situation and shouldn't be weighed on the scales of justice. But that's not reality, and that's not logic, reason, or rationality. That seems like exuberant intuition. But
Speaks to foreknowledge. I mean, those events speak to some sort of foreknowledge. Why do you have some sort of almost, I'm going to use a term that's probably not appropriate here, but these individuals who act when a certain event happens with a pre-narrated script? I'm just curious. It's very strange. Maybe they're just spooks.
World Trade Center
I don't
7
know.
announced 20 minutes before it fell into its own footprint by Jane Stanley on BBC News at 5 o'clock on September 11th. Reports a building that hadn't fallen yet, but does fall in 20 minutes. It's a script and an autoprompter that an actor read early. How did they do that? How did the box cutter guys do that? You got that one down on your bingo card?
Just like the individual who stood up and said, I'm the guy who did it, who, related to that same event. There's a lot of curious situations here. I think, again, absence of evidence. I mean, if anything, there's actually not an absence of evidence. It's absence of evidence for the prosecution, at least the way in which the narrative has been constructed. But there's a lot of circumstantial evidence, as circumstantial as it may be, which is a type of evidence, and would be totally plausible in civil cases, where you don't need evidence beyond a reasonable doubt. But at least circumstantially, all these other pieces of evidence show that at least the official narrative has major contradictions and holes or context missing from it that would have been easily solved, as Candace pointed out, if they would just allow for proper discovery, or if they would release the text messages or show us more footage from all the cameras that should have been available. Wouldn't surprise me the FBI has access to and is, sequestered, much like they did with Epstein, but then lost it somehow. Oops. But instead they don't do that, which only then begs the question, and no, begging the question is not a fallacy. That's why I like to use the term petitio principii. It's more specific. Begging the question just says, yes, it is a type of fallacy. Our language, that's the way we denote it, if we're running in circles logically. But it also can be used in sort of colloquial disposition or discourse to designate that there's questions that are unanswered. And this one question that's unanswered then begs another question that begs another question. We're trying to fill in the gaps. Two different types of begging the question. But it then begs the question is what's the motive, purpose, reason, and so forth behind all these extraneous events that occurred, including this curious individual I was unfamiliar with, Mike Mitchell, that does have a past, that does have a history of being on online chat forums and now online chat programs, right? Like a Discord and so forth. Maybe not.
Fakes,
maybe not
typos,
Discord,
misspellings, all the things that you would think that
that's a history
people from the 1920s with text capabilities. Oh, my love, my dear. Not a shred of emotion between either of those two gentlemen in the courtroom, by the way.
Nope.
Just observing the motive and the claims versus what you see with your five senses and your cogitation box between your ears.
And also the fact that he's largely scrubbed. You don't really hear about it, even in the documents of the what was the initial prohibited discovery or
predator catcher undercover. But the Boy Scout thing, Candace mentioned that he might have been the Boy Scout leader, and Boy Scouts have a bad reputation for things going on in the woods. And those types of situations where you've got someone who likes to set up kids or predators, you pretending to be kids rather, right? Like that whole relationship that might be unspoken, and maybe it's out there in Utah and nobody says nothing when they're Brokeback Mountain. But I don't know what's going on because they've hid this information and because the story they've given to the public was so not believable that people like me have had to take their free time and say, hey, what's going on here? This is a country. This man was assassinated. And there seems to be a lot of shenanigans that go to a higher political level than what everyone's cluing in with the guy with the furry boyfriend. I'm just pointing out the obvious because I'm not new to this.
Yeah, my first thought is is Mike Mitchell being blackmailed by activities that he's engaged in by being a part of certain organizations.
Yeah,
but I have no evidence.
They get the drop on cops with gambling and bribes
all
and,
the time.
Whole sorts of stuff. Like you ever, Breaking Bad plus Better Call Saul. There you go.
Yeah, Breaking Bad was That's true. But the point is still
pithy.
Pithy indeed. The point is still the same. The point is still the same, is the fact that the narrative, the evidence that's been presented doesn't hold up to the narrative. And the fact that even if Mike Mitchell is undercover, it still contradicts the idea that who then is the individual that pressured Tyler Robinson's father into making this confession that he didn't make. So that's what it comes back to. And behind the scenes supposed to be this individual named Mike Mitchell. Okay, if he's undercover, so be it. But there should have, at that point, if he's the individual, there has to be at least some mention.
He's a hero. He's a hero. He's the one that got the guy and caught. Why isn't he interviewed and he's everywhere? And he's
and why don't you break the cover? You break the cover at that point, be like, this guy's a hero. But even if you don't break the cover, you say, no, he's still part
He's
of our.
probably not undercover anymore either. So that's
Right,
not
that's
even
the
a
other
cover to
thing.
be undercover
Right.
because that's 20, 30 years ago, what we just talked about.
That's exactly right. He's not still probably doing undercover work. That's another thing. But he may have been
Might have
called up.
graduated.
He might have been called up to be like, hey, remember that thing you used to do back in the day? I'm just speculating
He
now. The
also
point-
does fugitive recovery. He's a very convenient guy to leave out of the story. I mean, it's like telling the story of Forrest Gump without putting Forrest Gump in the middle.
But if you don't state where that comes from, that's a key piece of evidence of Tyler Robinson's father, that's case. Like where the pressure campaign came from, that's a key piece of evidence that you cannot use to say for sure that Tyler Robinson, his father or his mother, were the ones that for sure turned him in because they were so convinced of his guilt. And also
Because of the clear 4K security footage where they're like, that's definitely our son.
Right.
And rather than find out from our son, we're just going to call the cops and say that's our son because it's convincing evidence.
Right. But they didn't do that. They instead relied on this very shady individual, Mike Mitchell, to pressure them and also the sheriff actually by saying, we know it's Tyler Robinson. We have all this evidence, we'll not come knocking down your door, and also it should be noted. I mean, this is where Candace is so correct. I mean, this is where Andrew, is his name Colvett, I believe his last name is just
Andrew Wilson or Colvitz with TPUSA. Wilson was the debater.
Wilson's the debater. Okay, I got those two confused. Andrew Wilson, I think, was confused because when you are dealing with any form of criminal or even civil lawsuit, there is a certain procedure, not decorum, but procedure that if you don't follow that, it can be used against you harshly. And counsel, that's their job, is to tell you the way in which that's supposed to manifest itself. So it is, I don't care what his feelings are in the moment. Just as Candace pointed out, the second you get counseled, if you're in a situation where you believe your son or daughter is innocent or guilty, you're going to be shutting up until the trial takes place for fear that you may cause greater harm than help based on your emotional reaction to a situation, even if you believe that all the evidence points to non-guilt, if it's his son or his daughter. So it's easy to say from that standpoint, because he tries to bring in, this is it's an appeal to emotion argument. Like, from an emotional standpoint, as a human being, I would be shouting from the rooftops that my son or daughter is innocent. No, you wouldn't. The second you get counseled with the way in which litigation takes place, no, you wouldn't. I guarantee you wouldn't, because they'd sit you down and say one wrong maneuver, one wrong statement, one wrong anything, and that'll be used against you. And that'll be used against you, not only you, but your son or daughter that is in that particular criminal situation, that criminal case or criminal court case.
Name somebody who's been on death row trial type of situation where their people have come out and talked to the media directly, not through a lawyer.
During the trial. Now, they may come out afterwards, right?
Right.
That a lot of times they come out afterwards. You'll get books, you'll get interviews.
Sure.
It happens
After the
all the
trial.
time after
Yeah.
the trial. There's such a long precedent set for that for a very specific reason, the way we do law in the West. Innocent until proven guilty. Out of civil law and torts and all the evolution
Well,
of law
Andrew's
since
not
the
supposed to
Magna
know
Carta.
that. He's not a lawyer.
It's just, but I thought it was disingenuous of him to try to throw an appeal to emotion. Again, I give Andrew Wilson some credit here. They wasn't overly emotional. They're not attacking each other. They're trying to remain civil and cordial. I think he was a bit in over his head because he clearly doesn't understand, again, where did that accusation come from? Oh, maybe the charging documents, maybe something else. Who's the individual that pressured him, the father, to turn in the son? Oh, wait, he never turned in the son? He just believes that was the case based after a pressure campaign by both the sheriff and then this shady Mike Mitchell guy? I'm just saying there's a lot
Maybe
of
Mike
pieces.
Mitchell got in touch with Tyler. And you know what I'm saying? It's like we don't know the order of operations because they left
don't
out
know.
a critical witness who would have been
And that's one of his pillars.
a
right?
person of interest.
That's
Let me just
Andrew
say it that way.
Wilson's pillar, right? He said that in the beginning, if I'm not wrong, Rich, right? He said that's one of his pillars, one of his three. He named 4 pillars, by the way, but he said 3. But one of his 3 pillars was that his father turned him in because his parents believe that the evidence is overwhelming against Tyler Robinson, and that explicitly was shown not to be the case based on the charging documents that Candace pointed to, in which case it basically alludes to, plus the charging documents allude to a timeline that's all screwed up. So in other words, you have this pressure campaign you have this situation where this Mike, well, it doesn't say Mike Mitchell in the documents if I remember correctly, but it does say that the father was essentially, they didn't say pressured specifically, but that was shown specific types of evidence that made the father sort of conclude, that it must be, which is another type of fallacy, by the way. I have to think about the name of that one, but it's almost like a variation of a straw man where you're shown a particular type of evidence and you're shown, look, A, B, and C, A is to B, B must be to C, right? It just follows logically. It's like, well, no, that's not the case here in this situation because you set the parameters by giving a false condition as your starting premise. So like, well, given this, it must be this, right? And so that you get in the hypothetical type of arguments and deduction. I won't get into the nuance of that. Just the point is, we understand hypotheticals and mixed hypotheticals. You run into these issues all the time, which is probably what happened here. But nonetheless, it doesn't say explicitly. Then it jumps to like Tyler Robinson's suicidal. Then Tyler Robinson, Lance, who were his roommate or whatever. It's like disjointed. Like the document itself, the charging document itself is disjointed. If you read those two paragraphs, my first thought was like, it doesn't.
Well, they didn't have a clean manifesto to copy everything from. They had to make the story from a bunch of different sources, which is the orgy of evidence that doesn't necessarily have veracity,
correct.
Substance, merit, as opposed to these other things that are definitive scientific tests that are usually carried out in shootings.
You said it.
It's just interesting. Well. It's interesting. It's a thing. It's a thing. Now, let's go with the talks about the intuition happen again at the beginning of this clip. So I would say, yes, intuition plays a role in getting you off your ass and asking a question. It means you can't just like, the store is closed. The intuition might be, hey, maybe they're still open. And then the action is, let me try the door handle. Oh, it's locked. Now I have to go someplace else and get the thing. So intuition is a starting point, not a conclusion. It is an initiatory point that leads you to ask questions.
Same with anecdotal evidence.
Yeah.
Same with anecdotes. Yes.
So it goes from intuition to inquiry to using your five senses to comprehend and understand so you can take action. Repeat. It's a cycle. It's a method. And intuition does play a role. Otherwise, you wouldn't know to use the question mark and you'd be making declarative sentences that don't match up to reality all the time. And that's the thing. How long was Tyler suicidal? He planned an assassination. He planned getting away with it, except he wrote these notes where he confessed to it. And then that allowed them to track him down. And all of a sudden he's suicidal.
But he wanted to get away with it. He wanted to get away with it first. But then he's like, fuck, I don't want to get away with it. I'm going to wait till my old age. I'm going to reveal everything. But now I'm not going to. I'm going to kill myself. Like what?
He thought he gets to shoot Charlie Kirk and go to a country club. And then Detective Mike Mitchell's like, no, they're going to want the death penalty. Is that what was going on? I'm not sure because they didn't tell us, and they exclude these meaningful parts of the dialogue and interrogative narratives that might have gone on had people been questioned. How about?
It's like a quoting out of context, like a corollary to quoting out of context fallacy.
He's suicidal, but he didn't choose death by cop at the situation. He ran away, and then he tried to return to the scene just to get his grandpa's rifle. That's an interesting story. Do you see? Because Andrew did talk about stories, right? That's in a story. Well, that's a couple cards away. Let's go to Tyler's phone. Why does his defense team not have access to his evidence that they're going to use to either shoot him or fry him or gas him? Why isn't the defense team have access to that?
Part of court cases. You know all about this. If the prosecution,
I know that they still have my devices.
I know.
From a court case 20 years ago, and I had to prove that I had training on how to use the device that I caught them committing the crimes on. So I know how corrupt these things can be, and I know the scrutiny that needs to come, and I also know how to read the rules before I go into the court and to outplay them without experience. I lost overall, but I beat them in court because I was able to call their witnesses to my testimony, and I didn't have to impeach them for their sake.
Hey,
at least I got them. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in this case, they accepted the evidence in your case, which is ironic. They just didn't want to have to speak to it. But that's another aside. I think when it comes to the evidence here, the prosecution is going to present evidence. Part of the procedure is that the defense gets to observe the evidence going to be submitted. That's why you can't, if you watched movies, court movies and whatnot, trial movies, where you see them bring in a piece of evidence at the last second that's not admissible, because that was not made apparent during discovery. If I remember correctly, that's the procedure. And so they have to.
It's in My Cousin Vinny for everybody. Come on.
Yeah, that's a great film,
starter stuff.
That's a great film. Classic. But My Cousin Vinny, that's hilarious.
He's sharing his files with me. That's called discovery. Hey, Tony, do you ever know about
The point's the same though, man. It's like in this discovery situation. I mean, so that was the prosecution going to break standard procedural law when they go to present this? Are they going to show? Because if they show fucking text messages and the defense allows that to occur, okay. I mean,
well, they
the
certainly
defense
don't
is either
have mobile cell towers, Stingrays. They don't have backdoor access in your operating system. They definitely can't write text on your behalf. The nation state that's not involved, that denied that they didn't do the thing, they don't have a habit of being in the back door of everyone's software and doing the thing. Don't worry about any of that and go back
ins
to,
law
you know,
promise. I'm just saying, you know,
ping pong, I
there's
guess. I don't know.
ping pong.
Forrest Gump got pretty good at ping pong along that movie if you pay attention.
There's another
Now,
history of espionage with a certain
I got
country
another
that
magic
does do
bullet
that.
for you. It's not the Charlie Kirk bullet. It's not the JFK bullet. Do you know about the guy who shot RFK in the back from standing in front of him? His name's Sirhan Sirhan. He's a Palestinian, and he might have been MK Ultra'd up, kind of like a Mark David Chapman type dude. Sit down on the curb and wait for the
I
police
was
to
going to
come.
say
Please.
the individual Mark David Chapman. He's the one who shot John Lennon, right?
Yeah, allegedly,
Yeah.
but there's an assassin who stands behind him with experience who was just like,
And it's not
you
like
know?
they haven't gone through. I mean, the MK program, MK Ultra is one of a subset of a number of different programs that have been going on for decades by that point. So it's not like they haven't come to an understanding, possibly sort of fractionate again the psyche or personality into multiple personalities and use code words, phrases, colors, whatever, some form of stimuli in order to trigger the patsy in this case to carry out. I mean, there have been, it's not just Manchurian Candidate. There's been so many different shows and movies about the same. I mean, people were fans of the Firefly, Joss Whedon, unfortunately, who's himself a pederast, it seems like. But great show, Firefly and Serenity. That was the whole premise of it. Here's, you know, a woman had her brain completely MK Ultra'd, and was it Miranda? That was a famous phrase she'd use that would trigger her into an assassination style robot like figure. So over and over again, you get themes like that. Manchurian Candidate, you know, the classic movies in this case, coming from a book, I believe, what, in the 1950s or 60s. It's a long time. I can't remember, but this theme has been around for a
Manchurian
long
Candidate
time.
was Richard Condon, 1961 or 62.
61 or 60.
And then they made the movie and Sinatra bought the rights to it, and then they wouldn't show it after JFK was assassinated. And then they remade it with Denzel Washington, Liev Schreiber, circa
I remember
2004.
that one. Yeah.
You know?
But the point is
Now-
like the fact that that's in culture and the fact that there have been government CIA funded CIA funded
Yeah.
through private proxies
And
techniques
this is what
of
we
mind
know
control,
about and can prove. But yes,
And
these
that's-
things exist on the playing field.
church committee stuff. So yeah.
All right. Now, there are situations in the past where messages purported to be people in their own words might have been artificially created. And I would cite messages on 9/11 that came from airliners that were flying at cruising altitude where you can't maintain cell phone tower connection long enough to have multi-minute conversations with ultimate clarity in a lot of cases, but you would need those recordings and those scripts read by people if you had multiple war games of numerous hijackings ongoing on the morning of 9/11, or if you planned for some of those hijacking exercises to encounter buildings or practice 3 times before 9/11 crashing a plane into the building. And what would we do? Or have the World Trade Centers in a crosshair in 1999 drills, or all the other drills that were going on during the attempt to intercept the box cutter hijackers who successfully penetrated the most expensive defense system in human history. And they did it not just once, not just twice, not just 3 times, but allegedly 4 times in a row. And then all of a sudden afterwards, they just stopped. They just stopped because those Michael Chertoff body scanners and the x-rays that they send or whatever they do with those things, that stopped all the terrorism, everybody. You just have to give them more money. It's usually for some sort of technology, but now we're in a special relationship. Maybe we just get that technology aimed at us for free. Space lasers aren't just for people in West Bank and Gaza and Defense Minister Katz is bragging about it in Jerusalem Post. So I
Like
don't know what
I
to
sent
do.
you that. Yeah, that was
You know?
hilarious. So I was like,
I
that
mean,
came full circle with that.
used to be a funny trope and a fundraiser to fight anti-Semitism. It looks like this, you get on the
Yeah.
Jewish lasers, Goyim Squad, Mazel Tov. That was a thing, and it fights
It took it
Jewish
as a
hate. And I'm happy to fund. I'm happy to fund anything that's anti.
I'm
I'm anti-Semitism.
anti-hate, anti-ethno racism of any type.
But now they
You
got
know,
this going on, and it's like, I don't know if I'm down with that. I don't know. I find the argument unconvincing. Let's say like
yeah.
that. So, other things that I needed to cover, the text, the confessions, the Discord. Yeah, that's all cool story. You should do what you were telling her to do and try it on, because like you might see that none of these things make sense conclusively beyond reasonable doubt to put someone in an electric chair or firing squad yet. I think a lot of people were like, yeah, my side won. Both sides claim it, by the way, right? Many times over, their side won. By what conclusive proof? And if you didn't know what the metric of winning was before you did the thing, maybe you don't claim it out. I don't know. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just observing like the multitude layers that this could have been a better workout for the audience and both of the debaters. They put a lot of time, effort, energy, and they put risk into it. They are the man and woman in the arena, as Teddy
Look,
Roosevelt talked about, right? So, respect goes to that. And a lot of people, the respect was paid with people's attention and energy, trying to listen with the intent to understand, or in other times they were just in the intent to make fun of, and both can be rewarding.
it seems to be a form of entertainment. Look, number of times he tried to, I wouldn't say completely, I'd have to watch the entire interview. I mean, there's more than many fallacies, I'm sure, on both sides, but just on the couple of clips we watched here, he's trying to call her out on this idea of conjecture, right? That it's subjective, that it's conjecture, that's sort of a God in the gaps argument, that the evidence, no
Well,
evidence
Zeno's
is not
paradox, I could
evidence.
prove that.
But
Go ahead.
damn you. But still, I mean, this still remains the truth, is that the fact that he keeps trying to sort of like pin her as someone who is arguing from an absence of evidence or arguing from some sort of pedantic perspective that's largely subjective, when in fact, what she's showing, at least in that clip, that recent clip, is that he's the one operating on subjectivity. Like he's the one actually making dubious claims and statements that he thinks are true, like on one of his pillars, because he doesn't even know where the evidence comes from that in this case, Charlie's father was the one that turned him in, and where that came from. He doesn't even
Tyler's
know.
father.
That's circular.
Tyler's father.
Can't restate their conclusion, in your premise. So I'm just saying, nonetheless, but that goes to the point, right? That goes to the point, the fact that this dude actually doesn't understand it that well.
He's a professional debater. So it just shows.
Yeah,
a professional debater, and the field is not that challenging, I guess.
If this dude is a professional
I've watched
debater,
Oxford Union debates and like the pedantic, we're going to use Robert's rules of engagement and all those good things, right?
Yeah.
That is not the quality. Like, I don't consider Candace a professional debater.
No,
so I wasn't really expecting her to like be all. I expected her to explain her position and to marshal some evidence.
And she
did well. That's why I'm like, Andrew's a professional debater. He does this for a living. And there were certain things that I was just like, I
didn't know he's a professional debater. Is that a joke?
I'm pretty sure he's like,
really?
I've seen a lot of clips of him debating in the past week.
No, you're right though. I mean, even
I saw more clips than I ever wanted to see.
Even
going on.
This is an old school take, but even going back in the day when Sam Harris, the rat that he is, and Jordan Peterson, as compromised as he is now, they had more meaningful debates when they had those talks. When they sat there, and the first thing they did was steel man each other's argument. Like they opened up the debate by trying to argue for the position of the other person. I mean, even just exercises such as that was a lot more meaningful, and it got right to the point.
Yes, Tony, in these types of debates, especially with someone like that, you have to elucidate their position and make some empathetic connection. And when you talk like Jordan Peterson, you just have to think like you're Kermit the Frog. And hi ho, I'm Kermit the Frog, and I'm reporting the news.
It's the same sort of thing. So
I'm
yes,
saying both
being
might
able
be
to state
controlled by Zionism. I'm just saying,
Yeah, I mean,
and then both at the same time
many
had more
such
meaningful
cases.
debates. And if Andrew Wilson is a debate expert, he sort of fails just even on that level to do your more traditional style debating. Now, granted, he is well spoken, and he did do a number of sophisticated, sophist level techniques, sophistic techniques, especially at the outset by trying to set the parameters, trying to bring Candace down to this level of this sort of subjective, crazy conspiracy theorist. He did a lot of these, but he did it subtly. Like, that's where I'll give him some, not credit, but that he might have at least some experience from the technique of how to win debates, not actually debate. There's a difference. There's a difference between winning in the eyes of individuals who have not been trained in logic, do not have mental self-defense, and so forth. You know, what I talk about in my course, which is Evergreen. People want to check it out. It's on the Agora Marketplace. Unapologetic. It's a slide in there, but nonetheless, um, it's still like if they're not trained in that, it's very easy to fall into the mentality of like who seems to be the stronger one in the debate. That's the number one thing I see in the online sphere with debates. Who comes out looking like the one that won? Who comes out looking like the one that dominated? Who is louder, pounded their fists harder, made the other person squirm a little bit. It's about those visual cues. That goes back to what I mentioned earlier on. It goes back to our hindbrain, goes back to the R complex, goes back to that more basal brain of survival rather than logic, which is built on top of that. So, we have to check those emotions, check those reactions to our logic center, because those emotional reactions, those feelings will happen or manifest before logic takes place. And we have to be forever careful of how that might affect our logic. And I feel like Andrew wouldn't surprise me at one bit based on what you just told me, that he's obviously competent to some degree, but he was in over his head in this capacity. I also don't think the format played into his ability to sort of do the gotcha that he was hoping he would get maybe from it. The format was more conducive, I think, for conversation that prevents the ability for him to dominate in the way I think he was hoping to. It's just my take.
Yeah, I mean, I thought he did a good job of acting as a gentleman and remaining respectful in her home.
Agreed.
And not like telling her that she licks sniz or something like that.
Agreed.
There were other parts where I was like, it's almost like it's a conflict driven strategy. Cause like from my perspective, there's a way he could have moved through the battlefield without even being touched to make a point. Not saying that that's the overall point or to conclude from that, but he could have said, I saw it happen and then I had questions and I went and found this and then I couldn't find this. So I didn't have that, but I found this and this. And later I came back and found this. And for me, it became a complete solution beyond reasonable doubt. 98% sure, they're leaving room for evidence that I haven't seen and maybe some unknown that, nobody's seen yet. New evidence that nobody has not disclosed until a debate. So I just saw like there's a way through without conflict, and it wouldn't have even disturbed her, and she might not have even seen you doing the whole thing if you like. But when you like, what's he charged on, and then when she's telling, and then you're getting like aggressive, like, and what was the seventh? It's like, dude, you didn't know the first or the second. Aggravated murder is different than murder, bro.
Oh yeah, there's degrees of murder
for a reason.
Yes,
it has differentiator words, extra syllables,
they carry different
understanding
based on the state law, or if it's federal, based on federal law, depending on who's bringing the case. But there's different sentencing requirement. These are all things that have been hashed out over many decades. But the point is, to your point,
get a Westlaw terminal. That's what I'm telling you.
You made a good point there, though. He would have been much more effective. Hell, even if he was only
that's what you need.
50% sure of his argument, it was still, I think, would have been more convincing for people to go on his 50%. Like, hey, Candace, you know what? You actually bring a lot of good points up. I don't know about this Mike Mitchell, but based on this, and this, I think it's still reasonable to consider. He could have built it out like that. I think it would have been much more authentic, genuine, and also why I would have called her more off guard, quite frankly. And, for those who are more persuasive that are listening in the audience, I think could have actually been much more effective, because there's just too many unknowns. If you speak to the fact where the unknowns are, but still try to build a case from that, which I think can be done, and at least whether I agree with it or not, it's a different take, but it could have been done. I think that would have given, at least in the audience's eye, a standpoint of credibility that you're trying to like match them on their level. Because one of the reasons why this is so popular is because of what Candace and others are bringing up. It's the absence of evidence or the contradictory nature of the evidence that's being presented. Maybe you agree, like at least acknowledge some of that, but then say why you still believe your position and present some of what you think are bona fide pieces of evidence that are in the public record. That would have been way more convincing than trying to do these emotional appeals or straw manning techniques or quoting out of context or false dichotomies, all the fallacies I've mentioned earlier that he's trying to set the condition of, but he's doing so with that voice. He has a good speaking voice. He obviously is intelligent. If he does debates, he's used to being able to be in uncomfortable positions. So I can clearly see he's okay with it from a disposition standpoint. But I think it would have been more persuasive capturing the more of the audience if he would have actually acknowledged more of that and been more actually not just acknowledged it, but more actually studied that more and more aware of it because that's the other issue is he wasn't as aware of it, which also you're trying to bring down the authority sort of perspective of Candace while you're bringing yourself down by the lack of knowledge you have of certain key pieces of evidence that are helping to build your three pillars of the evidence that make it to him be beyond a reasonable doubt that was Tyler Robinson before the trial has even taken place, mind you.
I mean, the way you try it on is that if that was you in your situation, would you want reasonable doubt? Like, wouldn't you want to say, hey, they didn't do a GSR and they didn't tie me to the gun and the slug doesn't match the rifle barrel?
The metallurgy, with the casing, and like they could have done a number of different things. They could have.
I got $10 that says Tyler never testifies.
Oh yeah,
There's no way he's testifying.
no, that's standard technique, by the way. I mean, I think even in the what was the case of the kid?
Oklahoma City bombing, Tim McVeigh. I
Well,
don't
of
think
course.
I don't think he got to testify.
But I was going to speak to something more. Yeah, of course, you didn't get a chance to testify. That's a whole another quagmire. What was the police officer that one that that went
Terrence Yakey
Terrence Yakey?
had a fear of blood, yet dragged himself through all this stuff, and like there was a whole thing with he's a Ron Brown. He's a
Yeah.
kind of an Aaron Schwartz type of situation you might have there.
That's right, Terrence Yakey.
It's
I
maybe even
remember that.
Michael Hastings-ish or Danny
Michael
Casolaro-ish.
Yeah, Danny Castellero. That's correct. So they all have. Unfortunately, there's an ominous continuity. There's a consistency with what happens with these types of individuals under certain circumstances when they're a part of events that maybe they weren't supposed to be a part of and happen to kind of see behind the curtain. I don't know, speculating. So
I mean,
this week,
Casolaro was blowing the whistle on Israeli backdoor software that turned out to be real and tied to Robert
Yeah.
Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein. So I guess he's just a conspiracy theorist who met his demise in a West Virginia motel with nothing to see there. Such things must happen. They get Gary
Yes.
Webbed is what happened.
Gary Webb, yeah, and maybe it was a promise.
They get Bill Coopered.
Bill Cooper is another one. Yeah, Bill Cooper. Oh my
I could keep going. There's lots
Michael
of names, unfortunately.
Hastings, yeah. And what was her Heschel?
They get Seth Riched.
The one that sort of stands up in the gurney, but then like gets back down.
They get Paul
And-
Wellstoned. See, I'm serious. There's a lot of them.
Oh, there's
Was
a ton.
suspicious. What was Hunt, E. Howard Hunt's wife? They blew up a whole plane to get her.
Yeah, that's
He
right.
threatened them from inside jail. He's like, I'm going to tell what's going on. And they're like, oh yeah, your wife doesn't exist anymore. Sorry about that.
Because my
And all of a
point
sudden
earlier,
he like changed his tune. Yeah.
yeah, go
It's just
after the
fascinating
family,
history
go after
that
close
you don't need to
people.
consider.
No, are there precedents
No.
for such things? There are. Is it a reasonable hypothesis to put forward that there could be consistent techniques being applied here, whether it's with Trump, whether it's with Charlie Kirk, with Iran, Israel? Just saying.
All right. Now, I've kept you an hour and a half longer than I promised when I asked you to come out to play. And I know you have to work tomorrow. So
I do.
I'm going to let you tap out. I'm looking up for the Agora Marketplace so I can find your course. And on here, we might even see, what do we got? We got. All right. So I do have the course infrastructure here. I'm just looking for, is it this one? Learning and unlearning. There's that one. Corbett. Critical thinking trifecta. You get that. Tony Myers Logic course. Boom. There it is. It's on Autonomy Agora Marketplace. If you just put it into a browser, you can get here. You can also find Jay Dyer's philosophy course on there. That's a big seller too. And Tony's Logic course, do you remember how many weeks it was?
Like 7 weeks. 7 weeks.
There you go.
And then there was 5 weeks of the Trivium course, which I don't know if they're consolidated into one now, but I have two.
No, I think they're
courses
two
on
different courses. There was the
Yeah.
how to learn anything, and then there was the logic course that you did.
Yeah.
And
so altogether 13 weeks, 12 weeks, 5 and 7. So 12 weeks. Trivium, I would suggest if people are interested in these subjects, the Trivium comes first, and then take the logic course. Trivium will give you the overview of the subjects that make up the arts of the mind, so to speak. Love one day to be able to have the opportunity to do a quadrivium course, but that'll be down the road. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. It's evergreen. You'll also see me pull a lot of clips that I think we probably showed at some point or another when I was co-hosting with you, Rich, during GTW back all those years ago. So should be, although some of those clips may be dated, the fallacies I presented in them are unfortunately perennial, and the way in which people argue fallaciously and not from evidence are still explicated there. So they're still consistent regardless of the timeline. Because I think I was the beginning of the Ukraine conflict and COVID was strong then and all that good stuff. But still the same machinations are going on now, just with different theaters. Now it's Iran and US, and still the Ukraine war is still going on. And although it's now becoming more and more belligerent because the West wants to galvanize some sort of like World War III, everyone all in scenario. Guess the dollar dominant situation is becoming a little bit tricky to
getting into the
manage.
dollar dominatrix market out there now.
Yeah,
Take
dominatrix,
it.
the word.
All right. I wanted to point out real quick, there might be some people listening and they think, I don't need Trivium method of critical thinking and creative problem solving in my life. I already know how to think. And I would challenge you, when and where did you learn how to think? And how do you prove that you know how to think? Because I'm betting you didn't get that in school. You must have done some self-education or had parochial school or something like that. And I just want to point out like this. If you don't know how to identify the individual parts, give names to those things, organize them into an understanding and a use model that doesn't have contradictions so you can get consistent results, then you don't know how to think. And you might think that having thoughts is thinking, and that's precious. But thinking is learning how to ask a substantial question and find verifiable answers on a consistent basis using a methodology that you can pass the answers to other people as a currency. And there's not a lot of currency that I saw coming out of the things that we've been discussing for the past little bit. So we will change topics soon. But Tony, I'm going to let you get back to living life. Thanks for coming out and being part of Grand Theft World 300 tonight. It means a lot, and I think the audience really appreciated a fresh perspective from the logic angle, and you having taught. We did the first logic course like 2010. It was a long time ago.
Yeah, 2011.
So yeah, so that's not what's on this page. This is a fresh one he did a couple years ago, but we've done it more than once over the years because it's something that we find rewarding just to revisit so we can sharpen our ability to think for our own self and our family and our community. But every now and then it's useful in the debate forum as well, because people come at you with very much certainty. And if you don't know how to defend yourself intellectually, you might get run over by not facts. So
yeah, I mean,
with
it's
that,
making explicit what we implicitly do by nature of
Yeah.
being a human being, which is our conceptual consciousness, our ability to reason. So maybe one day, if I find the time, it would be during winter months, I will re-engage the community and see if there's interest in doing another logic course or things of that nature. But until then, it's all in the Agora Marketplace. You can check it out. It's evergreen, as I mentioned. Clips may be old, but the fallacies are perennial in the way people use reason, logic, and language fallaciously. So you get a great benefit out of it. It's 12 weeks total if you include the trivium, 7 weeks for just the logic course. And if you choose to just engage with logic and not the trivium, although not my suggestion, you would still get a lot of benefit from it. Just the logic is one of the arts of the trivium. So it's the second art of the trivium. We're going to be technical. So I think it's just from that standpoint, I think it's, even if you choose to engage with, and I also made the logic course in such a way that you're going to get the most actionable, useful information to fortify your intellectual self-defense. We talk about physical self-defense all the time, whether it's using, firearms, whether it's learning martial arts, literally techniques to defend oneself and protect their bodily person. Same with arts of the mind. So you know, implicitly, yeah, we all understand that like if a knife is coming at you, maybe you want to like force the knife away from you.
Don't
Or
try
if,
to occupy the same space. It goes back to
yeah,
Newtonian physics.
it's pretty simple stuff. But if you don't understand technique of how to do that, it might be very difficult when you're dealing with like a knife attacker, let alone, you know, if you're dealing with some other weapon. Same idea with the mind. You might have implicit ideas, but there's the techniques of, lack of a better term, mind control, mental manipulation, NLP, all these different techniques have been developed to manipulate people's thoughts, behaviors, intentions, and so forth are very sophisticated. And I think without
And
making
those are all
explicit,
other than finding truth modalities.
correct.
NLP is not an attempt to find truth. It's like we know the truth and we're going to trick you. They know what they're doing is wrong. So that should tell you what side of the fence to be on,
So that's
especially if
why
you're
it's
a Christian.
important to make explicit the you know, the arts of the mind that has been granted by God or nature or whatever you want to believe, and to utilize that in a more fortified way, in a methodological way, in order to go about life with greater certainty and less uncertainty and less conflict. With that's the hope, at least.
Yeah, my hope at least is that my belief that neither person in the debate was bringing intentionally deceptive or tricky type of stuff. I think that where they lack understanding or congruity to that which exists is partly because the information set is well obscured by the authorities. And secondly, we all went through schooling that did not teach us how to do these things. And unless you spent a decent amount of time trying for yourself and refining these skills, it's pretty hard to see through any of these lenses clearly unless you learn how to polish them. But like Rumi said, you know, he's a poet. He said, how could you expect to be a polished gem if you can't take the first scuff? So here's all to be polished gems and getting out into the fray and trying to make it a better day. Tony, thanks for coming out tonight, man.
Yeah, thank you very much. So appreciate it.
Cool beans. I'll
Yeah.
see you soon.
Have a great night.